On Sunday, June 20th, 2004, 13-year-old Amanda Lankey spent the day with her close friend, 13-year-old Jessica Foster. It was Amanda's first holiday back in White Cloud, Michigan, since relocating to Florida with her family. Reunited after many months, the two girls planned to have a sleepover at Jessica's house that night. But the next morning, Jessica woke to find her bedroom window wide open and Amanda missing. It was initially assumed that Amanda had simply run away. However, that theory was rubbished 2 weeks later with the discovery of Amanda's body. Who killed Amanda Lankey and why? How did a fun teenage sleepover end in tragedy? Hello and welcome back to M7 Crime Storytime, where we cover solved, unsolved, and twisted cases from around the world. But before we delve any further, please take a moment to show your support by subscribing to our channel, liking our videos, and clicking on that notification bell to receive the latest videos straight to your inbox. White Cloud is a small town on the banks of the White River in Newaygo County, Michigan. With a population of just 1,479, the community is close-knit and friendly. It's a designated trail town, as many visitors and hikers from the North Country Trail often take a break in White Cloud to reconnect with people after several days spent in nature. The area is often rather safe, with violent crimes at just 2.78%. The residents rarely find themselves looking over their shoulders, and children play unsupervised without fear of danger. In the summer of 2004, Amanda Lankey was in the very same town visiting her grandparents and friends when tragedy struck, leaving the community reeling for years afterward. Amanda Nicole Lankey was born on June 7, 1991, in White County, Tennessee. She was raised by her single mother, Victoria Lankey, and had a large family of 2 brothers and 4 sisters. When Amanda was still very young, her family moved to White Cloud, Michigan, to live closer to her maternal grandparents, Tom and Linda Verhoy. Amanda was described as a child who loved to goof around and make jokes. She enjoyed school and excelled at her studies. Amanda also had musical talents and played several instruments. As she grew, she started to enjoy dancing, writing poetry, and experimenting with makeup, as all young girls do. She was also very sociable and maintained close friendships with several kids from White Cloud, despite her family moving once again to Spring Hill, Florida in early 2004. She missed her friends and grandparents after the move and returned to the small town during her summer holidays in 2004. She planned to catch up with old friends and enjoy the long summer days, even as she prepared to return to the 8th grade at Powell Middle School in Florida in the fall of the same year. However, Amanda would never experience the life she looked forward to having. On the night of Sunday, June 20th, 2004, Amanda and her friend Jessica planned to sleep over after having spent most of the day together. Amanda bid her grandparents goodbye and went along to Jessica's house, where she was always welcomed. After dinner, both girls went up to Jessica's room, where they spent some time listening to music, dancing, and doing makeup. It was late at night when the girls decided to sleep, determined to continue their fun the next day. Amanda and Jessica had spent the entire day enjoying each other's company after months of separation. Unbeknownst to either them or their parents, their sleepover was about to take a drastic turn. When Jessica woke up early on Monday, June 21, 2004, she noticed that her bedroom window was wide open. Even stranger was that Amanda was not in the bedroom. Jessica decided to go looking for Amanda around the house. She walked to the kitchen and living room, but there was no sign of Amanda. She then went outside, but still didn't find her friend. Not knowing what to do, Jessica went to her parents and told them Amanda was missing. Her parents followed her to her bedroom, where all of Amanda's belongings were still lying around. Jessica's parents immediately called Amanda's grandparents and the parents of their mutual friends to ask if Amanda had somehow gone to any of their houses. However, no one had seen Amanda since Sunday. Amanda's grandparents decided it was time to contact the police and report her missing. They were stumped by her sudden disappearance, as she would only have been wearing her pajamas. They could find no reason for Amanda to just disappear in the middle of a sleepover. The Newaygo County Sheriff's Office first questioned Jessica, inquiring if Amanda had mentioned any plans to go somewhere. Jessica explained that Amanda hadn't told her anything about making plans to leave. She also told police that she didn't hear anything during the night that would have woken her up. Jessica's family was also questioned, and her parents and siblings also told police they hadn't heard anything strange during the night. Investigators then questioned the neighbors. No one reported hearing any strange noises at night or seeing unusual activity in the area. The investigation had hit a brick wall, with no possible witnesses to a possible crime. Given that the leads had dried up so quickly, Investigators concluded that Amanda may have simply run away. Amanda's grandparents and mother argued that she was not the kind of girl to just run away from home. Investigators reasoned that they'd questioned the foster family and searched the house. There had been no signs of a struggle, and the people living in the house had not been disturbed by any unusual activity that night. They explained that the possibility of Amanda being abducted was unlikely, as not even the neighbors had seen or heard anything suspicious during the night. Amanda's family were outraged and began their own search. They started putting up posters with Amanda's information around the town, hoping that someone would reach out and confirm they'd seen Amanda. News of her disappearance burned through the town like a wildfire. The police received several calls from residents who reported spotting a girl who resembled Amanda. But none of these tips led anywhere, and Amanda's whereabouts remained a mystery. Working on their theory of Amanda being a runaway teen, investigators requested a search of Amanda's computer. Social chat sites on the internet had become a new way of communication for teenagers, and they believed Amanda may have made a friend online. Investigators theorized that Amanda may have decided to run away with that person. A search of her computer revealed that Amanda had been chatting to a young man online who went by the name Schizo Killa. The chats between them, however, discussed everyday things that happened in their lives. There was no mention of any plan to meet each other or run away together. But in a town as small as White Cloud, news of the online friend spread quickly, and soon even the residents believed that Amanda had simply run away with her online friend. The investigation continued as a possible runaway case. The sheriff's office didn't see the need to involve any other departments, like the Federal Bureau of Investigation, as they'd ruled out the kidnapping angle. They did make a public appeal for Amanda's online friend to come forward and provide any information regarding her disappearance. Amanda's family believed that something sinister had happened to her. They resorted to searching the town and making appeals to the public through the media. They explained that Amanda had not taken any of her belongings with her when she disappeared. Her clothes and bag had still been in Jessica's bedroom when she disappeared. Her family also told the media that she had no reason to run away. Amanda had been yearning to visit White Cloud since moving to Florida and had been extremely excited to reunite with her friends and grandparents that summer. Days turned to weeks without any breakthroughs in the search for Amanda. Investigators continued to pursue the online friend, but they never got any response to the request for information. All leads were coming to a halting dead end without any sign of Amanda. 2 weeks later, however, the missing person search was about to take a dark and disturbing twist. On the morning of Monday, July 5, 2004, police received a distressing call from mushroom pickers at the Manistee National Forest, 10 kilometers away from White Cloud. They'd stumbled upon a badly decomposing body hidden in the shrubbery. When police arrived, they instantly identified the body based on the description of the pajamas. Lying in the field was Amanda Lankey. Her body was transported to the medical examiner's office as investigators combed the field looking for any clues that could identify her killer. There was no murder weapon near the crime scene, nor were there any tracks that could be used to trace the movements of suspects. The lack of blood at the crime scene, despite the damage done to Amanda's body, also indicated to police that she may have been murdered somewhere else and then left in the forest. An autopsy confirmed that it was Amanda who had been found deceased and also revealed that she'd suffered several blows to the head by a blunt object, possibly a pipe or a baseball bat. The severity of the blows had broken her skull into pieces. Based on the rate of decomposition, her time of death was determined to be the very night she'd disappeared from the sleepover. Investigators were left speechless. The entire time they'd been investigating Amanda's disappearance as a runaway teen case, when in fact, the young girl had been murdered and left in a forest 10 kilometers away from White Cloud. They returned to their notes and began questioning the people that knew Amanda and her family. They conducted over 400 interviews and included the use of polygraph tests to weed out anyone who may have been lying. DNA samples were taken from everyone who was questioned, and hundreds of tests were conducted. But there was no close match to any evidence found on Amanda's body. Investigators then decided to look back into the online friend as a possible suspect. This was compounded by the fact that the online handle of Amanda's chatroom friend included the word killer. There was still no way to identify who Amanda had been talking to online. Furthermore, the correspondence between the two suggested that they were just friends. They'd never discussed meeting in reality. Investigators eventually returned part of Amanda's remains to her family for burial. They still needed to keep some of her remains in order to conduct the investigation. A memorial service for Amanda was held at the White Cloud Chapel, Michigan, on July 10, 2004. She was laid to rest at the Michigan Memorial Park Cemetery in Detroit on July 11, 2004. As Amanda's family said their tearful goodbyes, the Newaygo County Sheriff's Office worked hard behind the scenes to find her killer. Having conducted interviews with those closest to Amanda, investigators began looking through the evidence they'd collected. This included the clothes and other items she'd taken with her to the foster house that fateful night. Among the belongings, they found a diary belonging to Amanda. The contents of the diary would turn the investigation to a different and disturbing angle. Shortly before disappearance and murder, Amanda had written down alarming accounts of harassment in her diary. The information was very detailed, but the problem was that many pages had been ripped out. Investigators believed that Amanda had identified the man who'd been troubling her, but the identity of the person who had ripped the pages out remained a mystery. Investigators knew that teenage girls often talked to their close friends about things they wrote in their personal journals. Based on this idea, they decided to question Amanda's closest friends again. When asked if Amanda had mentioned anything about abuse or harassment to them, her friends immediately admitted that Amanda had spoken about a man who'd been troubling her. This new information hinted at a very dark twist in the case. Amanda's friends revealed the name of the man who'd been harassing her. The revelation was disturbing. It was a name that was familiar to the police, and it was someone who was already closely linked to the case. The man was Cecil Wallace Sr., the stepfather of Jessica Foster, and the man whose house Amanda had been staying at when she disappeared. But investigators could not rely entirely on the claims made by Amanda's friends. There was no substantial evidence against Cecil. No DNA had been found on Amanda or at the crime scene. A search of Cecil's house hadn't revealed any signs of a struggle. Investigators were also stumped about how Cecil could have committed such a crime while his family slept in the house, undisturbed and clueless. Cecil Wallace Sr. became a person of interest, but investigators knew they needed to find more evidence to label him as a suspect. Cecil Ellis Wallace Sr. lived in White Cloud, Michigan with his second wife, 2 stepdaughters, and his own son. He was employed at Big Daddy's 24-hour towing in Big Rapids, Michigan. Cecil didn't seem to have a criminal record. The only piece of information police found was that Cecil had been involved in an accident 5 years earlier in 1999. A background check into the accident led police to an intriguing discovery. Cecil's accident report was considered falsified. According to the report, he'd met with an accident while trying to avoid a deer on the road. However, the truth was that he'd been driving while under the influence and had an accident. The person who'd falsified the report was a woman named Candace Wallace Baumgartner, a White Cloud police officer and the sister of Cecil Wallace Sr. Candace had subsequently been fired from her former police department for falsifying the accident report, but had somehow landed a job as a police officer in White Cloud. The case was beginning to heat up. The whole family, including Cecil, was once again questioned about the night of June 20th, 2004, but it seemed there was nothing more they could offer other than their original accounts. Candace, too, was questioned, but she merely explained that she'd told her brother and his family to answer questions truthfully. She was listed as a consultant to the family during the investigation. Following these revelations, though, investigators served over 9 subpoenas to Cecil and his family and continued to conduct interviews and searches of their property. But no new evidence was ever found. There was nothing more that could be done. Everything to this point was purely circumstantial. Investigations into Amanda's murder continued for the next 4 years. Meanwhile, the residents of the small town had begun to believe the rumors that were circulating about Cecil and his family. Residents believed that Cecil's sister Candace was helping to cover up Amanda's murder. The family was becoming infamous in the community, and their home had been vandalized on multiple occasions. Police received several complaints from Cecil and his family regarding their treatment in the community. Despite measures to stop these attacks, everyone in White Cloud believed he was a murderer. Investigators tried hard to find any leads that could help solve Amanda's murder and, in turn, stop the harassment of Cecil and his family. In 2008, investigators turned to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in Washington, D.C. to help with the investigation. They believed that the officials could lend a fresh perspective and uncover some other clues among the case files, leading them to a possible suspect. Although the new team of investigators read through all the material provided and reviewed the case and the documents, their conclusion was the same. There was no concrete evidence to point to Cecil Wallace Sr. as a suspect, and so no warrant of arrest could be issued for him. By 2008, the case had reached a dead end. It remained cold until 2011, when an unexpected call uncovered new secrets and changed the course of the investigation. A 27-year-old woman from Texas contacted the White Cloud Police Department regarding information about Cecil. The woman told police that she was a former resident of White Cloud and had been following the Amanda Lankey case online. She told police that when she discovered that Amanda had been staying at Cecil's house on the night of her disappearance, she knew without a doubt that he was the man responsible for the young girl's murder. The woman alleged to have been a former victim of Cecil herself. However, what she said next put the investigation into yet another twist. She'd been abused by Cecil back in 1998 when she was only 13 years old, the same age as Amanda. The similarities were eerily identical to that of Amanda's case. The woman had been a friend of Cecil's older stepdaughter and had stayed over at the Wallace house one evening. In the middle of the night, she alleged that Cecil entered the bedroom and proceeded to assault both her and his stepdaughter. Afterward, he threatened them to remain quiet about the incident. She explained that Cecil was a very intimidating man, and she and her friend had been too terrified to go to the police.
If I would have went to police with what he did to me back then, I don't think I'd be alive today. And then I also think that if I would have said something, maybe she'd be here today.
But after learning of Amanda's tragic story, she felt it was her duty to tell police the truth to help put Cecil behind bars and away from future victims. She provided police with a written statement, which was used by investigators as evidence of her abuse at the hands of Cecil Wallace Sr. Armed with this new information, investigators approached the case from a different angle. They now turned to questioning women in and around White Cloud regarding their interactions with Cecil Wallace Sr. Several women came forward with stories of Cecil's inappropriate behavior. These events had occurred between 1999 and 2002, and most of his victims said they were between the ages of 13 and 16 at the time. Cecil Wallace Sr. was aged 43 when he was arrested at his home on October 28, 2011.
Investigators today arrested 43-year-old Cecil Wallace Sr. They charged him with 3 counts of criminal conduct for crimes involving 2 girls who were between 13 and 16 at the time, but are now adults. The alleged crimes happened between 1998 and 2002. Sheriff Mike Mercer and Prosecutor Robert Springstead told me today that they consider Cecil Wallace Sr. a person of interest in the murder of Amanda Lankey.
He was charged with assaulting several women and was officially named as a suspect in Amanda Lankey's murder. This time, investigators were positive he was responsible for Amanda's death, as the allegations made by his victims were overwhelming. At Cecil's preliminary hearing, Newaygo County Prosecutor Robert Springstead put forward all the evidence his team had uncovered during their investigation. Cecil was charged with 3 counts of first-degree assault. He was held on a bond of $150,000 at the Newaygo County Jail. A second hearing date was set for November 10, 2011. Cecil was able to raise the funds for his bail with assistance from family and was eventually released to await a second court date. He resumed his normal daily routine, even returning to work at the towing company. Local residents, however, were unhappy with the situation. They took to protesting outside Cecil's workplace by holding placard demonstrations. There were many incidents when residents demanded that Cecil be fired and called him out for being a predator in their community. But the case was heading toward yet another unexpected twist. Cecil did not show up at the appointed time for his hearing on November 10, 2011. He was declared a wanted man by the county for failing to make an appearance. At the same time, though, his family reported him missing after they were unable to contact him. They tried to contact him at work, but no one had seen him since the day before. Police remained on the lookout for Cecil, and a few hours later, his car was found on the outskirts of White Cloud in a remote location near Goodwill Township in Michigan. When police searched the area, they found Cecil. He had ended his own life.
Off the top tonight, stunning developments. A West Michigan man tied to the disappearance and murder of a teenage girl is dead.
Following Cecil's death, the investigation into Amanda's murder continued. A search warrant was issued for Cecil's home. Without a living suspect, investigators had to rely on finding physical evidence that could link him to Amanda's murder. Investigators examined every corner of the home, including breaking through drywall and removing floorboards to test for forensic evidence. But they never did find any physical evidence that could link Cecil to Amanda's murder. Cecil was therefore never formally charged with Amanda's murder, and the case is not officially closed. The last of Amanda's remains, which the police had used to aid the investigation, were returned to her family in 2013. Her family arranged for a reburial so that Amanda could finally be at complete peace. Meanwhile, the investigation turned from Cecil to his sister Candace. If Cecil was not going to pay for his crime, the police were at least sure to weed out the corruption within the Wallace family. Investigators wanted to know how much of a role Candace had played in the cover-up of Amanda's death. In August 2012, Candace was arrested and charged with intentionally misleading the case. Investigators discovered that Candace had been covering up for her brother for years. She'd coached him on various ways to get rid of evidence, how to properly wipe his fingerprints off surfaces, and how to plant false DNA evidence. During the back-and-forth hearings of Candace, investigators further discovered that she'd lied about her involvement in the investigation. Candace denied having any involvement with the case or evidence. She alleged she'd never been at the crime scene, but other officers contradicted her. They said she had, in fact, used her police ID to cross over the taped areas where Amanda's body was discovered and therefore was at the crime scene. In 2004, she took a plea deal and pleaded guilty to the perjury charges. She was also ordered to take a polygraph test with regard to her involvement in Amanda's case, but the results were never released.
New developments today in the decade-old case of Amanda Lankey. Developments her family hopes will lead to a breakthrough in the murder of the 13-year-old Newaygo County girl.
Today, the suspect's sister, a former cop, admitted to lying in the investigation, and now she's going to jail.
She was sentenced to serve 30 consecutive weekends in jail. To this day, Candace continues to claim that her brother Cecil is innocent and that she did not cover up for him. For Amanda's mother, Victoria, the most heartbreaking aspect was that Amanda never got to grow up and experience the life that awaited her. Victoria became a voice for change and started a campaign aimed at changing the way law enforcement handles child disappearances. The campaign's aim was to ban the term runaway and ensure that every disappearance of a child was given the highest priority. This was done to ensure that protocols were in place for immediate action. Victoria spent special occasions in White Cloud, Michigan, in memory of Amanda and the life she lived. Most recently, a memorial service was held on June 7, 2021, in memory of what would have been Amanda's 30th birthday. Amanda's murder continues to remain a mystery in White Cloud, Michigan. Residents still believe that Cecil Wallace Sr. is guilty of the crime, but the lack of physical evidence creates a conundrum. Was Cecil Wallace really guilty? Or was he driven by false accusations and shame to take his own life? "33-year-old Jared Bridegan was returning home on the evening of February 16, 2022, when he was gunned down in Jacksonville Beach, Florida. Residents who heard popping sounds contacted 911. After officers from the Jacksonville Beach Police Department arrived at the scene, they discovered the car's hazards were still blinking. Jared lay dead near the front of his SUV, while his 2-year-old daughter, Bexley, who was possibly the only witness to the crime, was still strapped into her car seat, unharmed. It became clear to police that the shooting was planned after they discovered a tire blocking Jared's path. As the investigation into his murder began, the community became captivated by the story of Jared Bridegan. But among the many whispers, investigators were going to stumble upon a lead. Was it the handiwork of a serial killer? Or had Jared made an unwitting enemy? Or was Jared just in the wrong place at the wrong time? Jacksonville, Florida is located along the Atlantic coast of northeastern Florida. With a population of 950,000 people, it's the most populous city in the southwestern United States. Jacksonville attracts many visitors who seek to enjoy the laid-back lifestyle with a touch of the good old American South. Jacksonville is also considered an affordable city to live in. On the downside, there is a high crime rate. Jacksonville's crime rate is one of the highest in America compared to communities of all sizes. There's a 1 in 30 chance of becoming a victim of a violent crime. In 2022, Jared Bridegan would become a victim in another senseless crime. Born on June 29, 1988, Jared Galen Bridegan was raised alongside his younger siblings Ashley and Justin and older brother Adam by parents Gaylord and Joanne Bridegan in Warrensburg, Missouri. His entire family relocated to Jacksonville, Florida when he was still very young. In 2007, he graduated from the Douglas Anderson School of Arts. He pursued a Bachelor of Science degree at Utah Valley University. After graduating in 2014, he pursued various career options. In 2017, he started working as a senior design manager at Microsoft. Jared was raised in a very devout Christian home and valued his religion and family above all. In 2010, he married Shanna Gardner, and together they welcomed a set of twins, Liam and Abigail. However, his marriage to Shanna ended in divorce in 2015. He then went on to meet a woman named Kirsten, whom he married in 2018, and together they had 2 girls, Bexley, age 2, and London, who was 6 months old, in 2022. Jared was described as a man who loved his family, with a happy-go-lucky personality, and had a positive impact on all those he met. Although divorced from Shanna, he never missed an opportunity to spend time with his twins. It was on one such night their entire lives would change. At around 8 p.m. on February 16, 2022, Jared had just left the home of his ex-wife, Shanna Gardner Fernandez. He'd just spent the evening having dinner with his 10-year-old twins, Liam and Abigail, whom he shared with Shanna, and his daughter, 2-year-old Bexley, whom he shared with Kirsten. As he drove out of the Jacksonville Beach area, he took notice of a single tire blocking the exit out of the sanctuary neighborhood. Not wanting the tire to obstruct anyone else or possibly cause a serious accident, Jared decided to move the tire off the road. He slowed his car and switched off his engine before turning on the hazard lights to alert other passing motorists of his presence. As he stepped around to the front of his vehicle, he was ambushed by an unknown gunman. The neighborhood was quiet, and those living in the area heard several distinct popping sounds. Several calls were made to the Jacksonville Beach Police Department, reporting gunshots in the neighborhood. When police arrived at the scene shortly after 8 p.m., they found the car with its hazard lights still switched on and a man lying in a pool of blood near the front. Inside, they found a baby girl still strapped into a car seat. They identified the victim as 33-year-old Jared Bridegan of St. Augustine's, Jacksonville. The child was taken to the police station as officers contacted Jared's family to report what had just happened. As Jared's wife, Kirsten, made her way to the station to be with her daughter and answer important questions, other teams of investigators remained on the scene to assess the situation. The vehicle was checked and investigators determined that nothing had been wrong with the car. Jared had stopped voluntarily. Residents were questioned and many reported that there was no argument heard before the gunshots rang out. Shell casings from a handgun were found at the crime scene. It was discovered that Jared had been shot at close range. Sergeant Tanya Tater of the Jacksonville Beach Police Department said the investigators in charge of the case believed the shooting had been planned. She said the belief stemmed from the fact that the tire was placed in such a position that whomever was driving would be forced to stop to remove the obstruction. It was also discovered that nothing had been stolen from the car of the victim. The shooter was then able to get up close and shoot the person while they were trying to remove the tire. Exactly why Jared was targeted could not be determined. It may have been a case of the wrong place at the wrong time. Investigators reached out to the community for information. They questioned walkers and joggers who may have noticed any suspicious activity prior to the shooting and asked residents with surveillance footage to submit any videos that could help them piece together the puzzle of the murder mystery. At the station, Kirsten answered questions about Jared and any possible enemies he may have had. She told investigators that nothing seemed out of the ordinary and that she'd called Jared minutes before the shooting. He seemed in high spirits after dinner with the kids and didn't mention any feeling of unease. Kirsten also mentioned to investigators that Jared routinely took this particular exit in order to get back home after dinner with the twins. But for all she knew, there was no one who wanted to kill Jared. He was not the kind of person to make deadly enemies.
The minute you met him, you just fell in love with who he was. He honestly was the best dad. Whenever I needed a break, he scooped up all the kids, took them out, did something, or took them outside and gave me a minute to catch my breath.
Jared's murder was quickly becoming a whodunit. Investigators were working hard to find his killer and scoured security footage that they believed would uncover the clues they desperately needed. They knew the tire being in the road was no accident. It was intentionally placed there to stop a vehicle. A reward of $55,000 was set up for any information that could lead to arrests in Jared's murder. It was a sensational story, and the media also looked into uncovering information about the victim and his background. This was further compounded by the many whispers in and among the residents in the area. This started after Shanna's absence was noticed at Jared's funeral. According to family members, Shanna was not invited, but what raised eyebrows was that she did not allow their twins to attend either. People began to talk about Jared's personal life, particularly his relationship with his ex-wife, Shanna Gardner Fernandez. it wasn't a secret that Jared and Shanna had gone through a messy divorce. But now, the true story was coming to the surface. Jared had met Shanna in Florida in 2009. They'd fallen in love and got married in 2010 in Salt Lake City, Utah. Shanna then gave birth to a set of twins, one boy and one girl. However, their son had suffered from a congenital heart problem. The family relocated to Connecticut for the sake of their son's health. But 2 years into the marriage, problems began to arise. Frustration in the relationship grew as both spouses seemed to be living separate lives. Jared and Shanna, though, decided to give their relationship a fresh start and made the move to Jacksonville. Here, he began working as a chief technology officer at Clean Simple Eats, and Shanna began her own baking company from home called Beach Baked 904. All seemed to be going well until December 2014. Problems arose when Jared discovered intimate emails being exchanged between Shanna and her trainer. She denied the affair but told him that she did not love him anymore. According to reports, Jared did not want to give up on their marriage because of the children. But by then, their marriage had fallen apart. By February 23, 2015, Shanna filed for divorce from Jared. Thus began a bitter court battle. Although he fought to stay together initially, Shanna filed the divorce papers and stated that their marriage had been irretrievably broken and they didn't love each other anymore. They lived together for a while in their Jacksonville home, but Shanna eventually demanded she be granted the house in the divorce and primary custody of the children. There were over 300 entries and motions filed between Jared and Shanna in the court folder. Shanna had accused Jared of showing an behavior towards their children. She'd even gone as far as to accuse him of wanting to steal from their children's trust funds. It's important to note here that Shanna and Jared were financially supported by Shanna's family since the very beginning of their relationship. Her parents, Sterling and Shelley Gardner, were the founders of Stampin' Up!, a multi-million-dollar arts and crafts company. They were also important figures in the Mormon community in Utah. Shanna's parents bought them their first house and provided a hefty allowance to the couple to maintain their lifestyles. Even when the couple moved to Connecticut and then Jacksonville, her parents were the ones to buy them their homes. Based on this, Jared countered Shanna's accusations and demands. He said he wanted primary custody of the children, the house, and alimony from Shanna, as she had the resources to afford her lifestyle, whereas he did not. He also allegedly told his lawyer that Shanna lied about not having any income, as she worked under the table for her mother and received thousands of dollars in income. Jared also accused Shanna of spying on him by placing baby monitors in the children's bedrooms and attaching a tracking device to his car. The divorce proceedings grew nasty as they fought for custody and alimony. In July 2015, their lawyers finally came to an agreement. Jared and Shanna were awarded a shared parenting agreement of 50-50. Both Jared and Shanna were remarried to different people by 2018, but this didn't stop Shanna from fighting her case. In 2019, Shanna accused Jared of coaching the children and interrogating them about her and their lifestyle. She claimed that he intended to use these recordings against her in court proceedings. She went as far as to demand a social investigation into these accusations in June 2021, as she believed this was a form of abuse. She once again made a filing against Jared, claiming he was being vindictive towards her when he refused to lend her a ventilation machine for their son Liam. She claimed Jared was more concerned about hurting her than his own son's health. The new information, though, was merely speculation and not something solid enough to accuse Shanna of being responsible for her ex-husband's death. But when Shanna's name started to appear in the newspapers, two people came forward with even more interesting information to the media. The first was an employee at a tattoo and piercing parlor in Florida. According to the employee, Shanna had come into the shop and wanted to get a piercing in February 2015. They formed a friendship after discovering they both had lived in Utah. She returned often to the tattoo parlor and vented about her soon-to-be ex-husband and their marital issues. It was only after dinner with their mutual friends that the tattoo artist noticed the red flags. Shanna mentioned looking for someone who could shut her husband up, but no one took her seriously. He didn't think much of it until Jared's murder. A few weeks after the tattoo shop employee spoke out, another man came forward, Shanna's former personal trainer. Shanna had denied having an affair with her trainer to her ex-husband, the courts, and anyone else who asked her about it. However, the trainer said that they did indeed have an affair. According to the trainer, Shanna told him that she and Jared were separated and not living together. He told media outlets that Shanna lied to both him and her husband, and the affair had occurred while she had still been married to Jared. At this time, the trial by media of Shanna Gardner Fernandez was reaching a fever pitch, and she eventually resorted to hiring renowned Jacksonville defense attorney Hank Cox III. This, Shanna said, was done in order to protect her and her family from becoming embroiled in the sensationalism surrounding the case. Shanna made a statement that the scrutiny had started to make her children feel unsafe and that they were struggling with all the attention. Although the media seemed to have done their own investigation and the community had seemed to have reached their own verdict, investigators were still no closer to finding Jared's killer. By June of 2022, Shanna granted a one-time interview to Action News Jax's Kristen Rary. She did this in order to finally clear her name and explain her silence and actions to the watchful public. She firstly explained why she stayed silent about Jared and her life with Jared before the divorce.
I was asked to not talk to the media or give a public statement, but with the level of speculation, I felt that now it was necessary to speak out. I'm sure you would say that we've had happy moments.
She then went on to tell the interviewer about the evening Jared was gunned down.
It was actually one of the things. I'm sorry. I remember my son tucking him in and him saying that it was a good date night.
The interviewer then asked the burning question if she'd been involved in Jared's murder.
No, I did not have anything to do with his murder.
Shanna then explained why she hired a defense attorney and that she would not want anyone to go through an experience like this.
He was referred to me by several friends, and ultimately my kids' images and videos were being used in the media without consent.
Investigators, however, continued working behind the scenes for 11 months before they released any information to the public. It seemed like the case had gone cold, but the investigative team had already begun working with a new possible lead. This was because investigators had received some very interesting information. The tire that was found at the scene was matched to a Ford F-150 Lariat truck. Furthermore, analysis of the security footage collected from homes and businesses in the area also showed a dark-colored Ford F-150 truck believed to be a 2004 to 2008 model circling the area where Jared was shot shortly before the incident. After several months of searching through records, they finally found a match. It had been the breakthrough they hoped for. Investigators discovered the man that they'd been looking for had already been in jail since August 18, 2022 on unrelated charges. 62-year-old Henry Arthur Tenon had a long list of criminal offenses dating back to the 1990s. Tenonville was born in Hawkinsville, Georgia in 1961 and moved to Jacksonville around 1991. His current employment history was listed as self-employed on his Facebook account. Between 1998 and 2022, his list of offenses included domestic battery, operating a vehicle with a suspended license, criminal mischief and trespassing, and driving under the influence. By the time investigators discovered his involvement in Jared's murder, he was charged for being in possession of a weapon as a felon and for driving with a suspended license during a routine traffic stop. On January 25, 2023, police announced the arrest of Tenon in relation to Jared Bridegan's murder. However, their investigation was far from over.
Just under an hour ago, this man, Henry Tenon, was arrested for the following crimes: conspiracy to commit murder, second degree murder with a weapon, accessory after the fact to a capital felony, all directly related to the murder of Jared.
Investigators were still not convinced that Tenon acted alone in the murder of Jared Bridegan. Instead, they ordered a 30-day seal be placed on the case until more information became available to avoid jeopardizing the investigation. Having discovered that Tenon was the man whose vehicle was seen on security footage, they now needed to find his link to Jared. Investigators then went on to conduct witness interviews and look through Tenon's personal records. With more than 77 subpoenas and 30 search warrants issued to various departments for information, they stumbled upon a link that would catapult the case. The twist in the case was unexpected. Investigators were now questioning how much of the local gossip may have actually been true. A background check of Tenon revealed that he was a tenant in a home on Potomac Avenue in Jacksonville. The home was owned by 34-year-old Mario Fernandez Saldana. Mario was Shanna Gardner Fernandez's second husband. This was the only link between Jared Bridegan and Henry Tenon. Mario and Shanna met at a CrossFit gym in 2018 where he was a maintenance man. The two got married in the same year and lived together in Jacksonville Beach with their children. Mario managed and maintained rental properties in Florida and had become a big supporter of Shanna during her ordeal with Jared. Mario did not have a criminal record, but was involved in an intimidation incident in 2018 with a neighbor. The 2018 report submitted by Mario's neighbor about the incident stated that he intentionally walked his pit bull up to where she'd been feeding a few stray cats. When police were called to the scene, Mario told them he had no malicious intent. The officer then advised him about municipal ordinances involving dangerous animals and suggested he contact animal control about the feral cat problem. The neighbor, however, said that there had been other run-ins with Mario that included threats about the cats. Investigators were able to link Tenon to Mario through phone records and banking records. Mario had apparently given Tenon 3 handwritten checks between October 2021 and February 2022. There had also been unusually high phone activity building up to the night of February 16, 2022, and a decline in the months that followed. Mario's arrest was announced on March 16, 2023. He was charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, solicitation to commit a capital felony, and abuse in relation to having a minor present at the scene of the crime.
Today, we announce the additional arrest of Mario Fernandez Saldana for several charges related to Jared's murder.
Kristen spoke of their pain as a family after the announcement.
We have great relief knowing that 2 of the people behind my husband's murders are now behind bars and are no longer a threat to our family. We are also still angry that they were walking free while we were grappling with the reality that Jared wouldn't be here for any future memories, vacations, or tender moments with our kids. Angry that our youngest, who was 6 months at the time of his death, will have no memories of her father. Angry there will be no new memories for Liam, Abby, Bexley, London, or anyone who knew and loved Jared. We have fought hard for the truth, and the world now knows what we have known all along, that Jared truly was an innocent victim.
On the same day, Tenon pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and admitted to being the man who pulled the trigger. He also agreed to testify truthfully against any co-defendants. The charges of conspiracy to commit murder, accessory after the fact to a capital felony, and abuse in relation to having a minor present at the scene of the crime were dropped due to his cooperation. Police have theorized that Mario had murdered Jared for financial gain. The theory stems from the fact that Jared was claiming alimony from Shanna Gardner Fernandez, Mario's current wife. Mario appeared in court on April 4, 2023, and pleaded not guilty to the murder of Jared Bridegan. He was remanded in custody and denied bond. In May 2023, prosecutors said they were intending to seek the death penalty for Mario Fernandez Saldana.
Mario Enrique Fernandez Saldana, pursuant to Florida Statute 78204B, that the state of Florida intends to seek the death penalty for first-degree murder charged in this case.
On Tuesday, June 20, 2023, Mario Fernandez appeared in court once more. He pleaded not guilty once again and waived his right to a speedy trial. Mario has opted to fight his case in front of a jury. His next court date was set for July 1, 2023. Shanna Gardner Fernandez still remains a person of interest in the case. Her strange behavior has not gone unnoticed by investigators or Jared's family. For one, property records show that Shanna moved to Washington with her children just weeks before Mario's arrest. The property, however, was purchased by her parents in September 2022. Her parents also added fuel to the fire by releasing a statement to their employees the day before Mario made his first court appearance. In the email, they acknowledged Mario's involvement in the case, and the only information they have is what's been reported to the media. They also made sure to mention that Shanna and Mario had been separated for an extended period of time before news of his arrest broke. Jared's widow, Kirsten, has not kept quiet about the email or any of the social media posts made by Shanna and her family. She pointed out that the Gardner family did not share any condolences with Jared's family in their post, have distanced Shanna from Mario, and have somehow minimized the extent of the charges brought against Mario. In interviews and press conferences following the announcement of the arrests of both Henry Tenen and Mario Fernandez Saldana, Kristen Bridegan and Jared's brother Adam Bridegan talked about the pain suffered by their family.
As I learned more details of what happened to Jared, that there's a tire, it was pretty clear that someone knew his route, his schedule. I have felt since the beginning that this was planned, this was thought out, and this was specific to Jared. So I am not surprised that they announced that Henry Tenen, someone that we've never heard of, that Jared did not know, wasn't alone in this.
It's frightening, frankly, that there is a connection and that there is this mass conspiracy. It does not help us sleep at night.
Adam also makes mention of an eerie remark that Jared once made about being afraid of something bad happening to him.
I did have several conversations with Jared where he did express concerns that something like this could happen to him.
There remains speculation about Shanna's involvement in the case. Some believe that Shanna may have known about the entire crime, while others feel that Mario acted on his own out of love and concern for Shanna's well-being. For now, though, investigators are still working on the case and have not released any new information regarding the investigation. On December 4th, 1998, John Trover and his wife, Cheryl Trover, returned home after having a fun Friday night with friends. That night, as the family got ready to go to bed, tragedy came knocking on their door. What was supposed to be a regular night for the Trovers turned into a nightmare by the next morning as the sunlight gleamed through the windows of the Trover family home in Gillette, Wyoming. The worst had already happened. John Trover's body was found lying cold and lifeless in the house, while his wife, Cheryl, and his two kids, Tori and Jackson, had been subjected to a harrowing ordeal. Who could have targeted such a simple and happy family? What really happened that chilly December night in the Trover residence? Gillette is a small town in Campbell County in the state of Wyoming. Gillette is heavily covered in tall, coarse grass and deep, fertile soil. Apart from that, Gillette's also centrally located in an area involved with the development of vast quantities of coal, oil, and coal bed methane gas. The city is famously known as the energy capital of the nation. Wyoming provides nearly 35% of the nation's coal. It depends on ranching and rich, low-sulfur coal deposits. Gillette has seen steady growth along with Wyoming's coal industry over the past 25 years, drawing blue-collar residents of eastern states whose coal industries have lagged. Despite being a small town and inhabiting mostly families, Gillette is only safer than 24% of all cities in the country. And the horrors faced by John Trover are proof of that. John Morris Trover was born on May 16, 1955, to his parents Wellington Morris Trover and Iris White Trover. He grew up to be a kind and humorous person who was always considered good company by others. Not much is known about his childhood, but by 1998, when John was 43, he'd become a devoted family man and his life mostly revolved around his wife and kids. He worked hard at an open-pit mine named Eagle Butte as an accountant. Cheryl Trover was John's second wife, and they'd been together for 14 years by 1998. They had two kids, a 13-year-old daughter named Tori and a 10-year-old boy named Jackson. Both Tori and Jackson were athletic and actively took part in physical activities. Apart from them, John also had an 18-year-old daughter named Brooklyn from his first wife. John had won custody of Brooklyn at the time of his separation from his first wife. John was loved by his family and friends for his fun-loving personality. Even though he wasn't really good with guns, he'd still go out hunting with his friends just to enjoy the company. In 1998, Cheryl was working as a high school math teacher at Campbell County High School. She was quite good at her job and was considered a favorite by many students. She had a strong reputation in her community. Like her children, Tori and Jackson, Cheryl Trover too was athletic. She was lean and muscular with long dark hair. She lifted weights religiously at a stylish warehouse-style gym where she and John often played racquetball. At the time, Cheryl was also pursuing a master's degree in education administration. People who were close to John and Cheryl described them as a happily married couple. They followed a simple lifestyle and were quite content with their lives. At around 5:20 a.m. on the morning of Saturday, December 5, 1998, two people who were on their way to work caught sight of a burning truck on the side of a road. As they quickly managed to get a fire extinguisher to put out the blazing truck, they heard a woman's voice coming from a culvert alongside the roadway and informed the authorities immediately over a phone call. That woman was Cheryl Trover. The detectives arrived at the scene and questioned Cheryl. She told the detectives that the previous night, on Friday, December 4th, 1998, she and her husband, John, returned home after having a few drinks with their friends at Humphrey's Bar and Grill. Around 10:30 p.m., after putting their kids, Tori and Jackson, to sleep, Cheryl and John were preparing to go to bed as well. That was when they heard someone knocking on the main door. As John opened the door, a man barged in. An aggressive argument ensued between the two, and the intruder started attacking John. Cheryl told the police that the intruder shot John and slit his throat. He tied Tori and Jackson up with a rope and then came after Cheryl. The man assaulted Cheryl and then kidnapped her.
Depois que eles foram amarrados, o intruso os mandou ficar quietos e não tentar se soltar da cama.
He tied Cheryl's hands and feet and forcefully got her into the family's small pickup truck. After driving south of Gillette for a while, he parked the truck in an isolated spot, got out of the vehicle, and set it on fire. Cheryl managed to get herself out through the passenger side of the truck right before it caught fire. Cheryl crawled into the culvert and hid there. The man didn't make an effort to chase after Cheryl and instead fled the scene. Cheryl also informed the detectives that the intruder was most likely an Hispanic male, probably in his 30s or 40s. He was about 6 feet tall and was wearing cravat overalls, cowboy boots, and a dark ski mask. Based on the argument between John and the intruder, Cheryl was quite sure that they both were acquainted, and it could have been someone from John's workplace. Later that same morning, when the detectives arrived at the Trover residence, they found John's dead body lying cold on the floor in the lower living area. The kids were also found, but they'd not been harmed at all. Sergeant Steve Rosier was assigned as the lead investigator on the case. In the morning hours of Saturday, December 5th, 1998, John's body was sent to Cheyenne for an autopsy after being discovered. John and Cheryl's children, Tori and Jackson, were taken to safety. The intruder had only tied the kids up and thankfully had not attempted to harm them. Cheryl had marks of struggle on her body and was sent for a medical examination. As the detectives waited for the results, an air and ground search was conducted around the area where Cheryl had been taken to by the intruder to see if he was still there. Even after dedicating long hours to the search, the detectives couldn't locate the man Cheryl had described to them. However, it turned out that the truck's fire had been put out just in time to preserve some important pieces of evidence. Partially burned clothes were recovered from the truck, which fit the description of what the intruder was wearing, according to Cheryl. The detectives then moved on to questioning Trover's neighbors and friends. According to Leslie Flacchini, a friend of the Trovers, Cheryl and John looked really happy and there seemed to be no trouble in the 14 years that they were married. But some of the neighbors notified the detectives about an odd claim Cheryl had been making recently. In the last few days before the crime, Cheryl had been telling her neighbors that she had seen a man wearing coveralls, cowboy boots, and wire-rimmed glasses near her house. The detectives noted that it was the same description Cheryl had given to them of the intruder. When the detectives took a closer look into John's life, his co-workers at Eagle Butte Mine revealed that for the last 6 months, they'd been receiving threatening phone calls telling them that there would be a layoff at the company. They believed that the caller was most probably a female speaking in a low voice as a disguise.
Pela voz da pessoa, parecia que ela estava mesmo falando sério sobre cumprir as ameaças.
When Tori and Jackson were finally in a sound state of mind, the detectives had a round of questioning with them as well. A few intriguing statements were made by the kids in the process. Tori and Jackson believed that the person wearing a ski mask who had tied them up in ropes was none other than their mother, Cheryl. They thought that it was part of some game and went along with whatever she said. This made the detectives wonder whether Cheryl herself was involved in the murder of her husband. Additionally, when a search was conducted of the Trover house, books on how to commit murder were found. Within hours of the crime being reported, the detectives already had a theory. They heard whispers that Cheryl was involved with a man named John Riley. Riley was a divorcee and the principal at Campbell County High School, the same school where Cheryl worked as a teacher. The detectives made quick decisions and proceeded to question Riley. When he heard the news of John's murder, he was surprised. Without any resistance, Riley came clean to the detectives about his relationship with Cheryl. Riley had been having an affair with Cheryl for the last 4 years, and according to him, John didn't have any suspicions about it. Riley was also a neighbor to the Trovers, living right across from them. John and Cheryl would often go over to Riley's house for dinner. They also had a key to Riley's house and knew his place well. On Sunday, December 6, 1998, the autopsy report was delivered, which revealed that John was shot in the head and arm and stabbed multiple times, one wound being to the heart. The bullets found were for a .22 caliber rifle, but John's injuries from the shotguns were superficial, implying that there was a high chance that the .22 caliber rifle bullets were placed into the wrong gun when the shots were fired. The report concluded that John had died from blood loss. The detectives initially thought of Riley as a potential suspect, believing that, with John out of the way, the path for Riley and Cheryl would be clear. They conducted a search at his house, and 2 guns were discovered. One was a handgun, and the other a .22 caliber rifle. By now, the detectives were almost sure that Riley had murdered John. But Riley had proved that he'd been at an educators' conference in Scottsdale, Arizona, the night of the murder. After a thorough cross-check, Riley's claims turned out to be true, and he was cleared as a suspect. Now, the fingers only pointed at one person. The detectives arrived at the conclusion that Cheryl herself had murdered her husband, John. When the two returned home after having drinks with their friends that Friday night, Cheryl went up to Riley's house, knowing that he was out of town, and took his handgun. She'd mistakenly loaded the handgun with .22 caliber rifle bullets, which misfired. And when those gunshots weren't enough to murder John, she found John's 6-inch hunting knife and killed him in the kitchen. She dragged her 6-foot husband's body across the floor and down to the lower living area where the body was found. She wiped the blood off the handgun and returned it to Riley's house, then drove off in the couple's pickup truck. In the southern outskirts of town, she stripped naked and set fire to her clothes, the cowboy boots and coveralls in the truck. As the truck burned, she fled into a field and hid in a drainage culvert, emerging only when police arrived at around 5:30 a.m. Results from Cheryl's medical examination showed that she was only injured in parts of her body she herself could easily reach. This indicated that Cheryl's injuries were self-inflicted. The details Cheryl offered were confusing. On Sunday afternoon, December 6, 1998, Riley phoned Cheryl and asked her to meet him, as the detectives had found the murder weapon. Cheryl told him that she'd be there in half an hour, but she never showed up. Instead, she went to a friend's ranch west of Gillette, Wyoming. She went upstairs, found a rifle in the master bedroom, locked herself in an adjoining bathroom, and shot herself. The detectives believed that the motive behind John's murder was very complex, but it surely stemmed from an unhappy marriage that led to Cheryl Trover wanting to be with Riley. Cheryl was afraid that if she separated from John, she'd lose the custody of her kids, as John was a great father and he'd already been given custody of Brooklyn, John's daughter from his first wife.
Na minha opinião, eu acho que ela tomou a decisão de matá-lo uns 2 ou 3 meses antes de realmente fazer.
Cheryl was also well-liked. She didn't want to lose her reputation within the community. John Trover's life was cut short abruptly by his wife Cheryl Trover, leaving his 3 children robbed of a father's love and care. A ceremony was held, and John was laid to rest in Larkin Sunset Lawn Cemetery, Salt Lake City, Utah. Leslie Flacchini, a friend of John and Cheryl Trover, knew them for 11 years. Less than 2 weeks before the murder, she saw them at a junior high girls' basketball game. The couple was sitting right behind Leslie as they talked the entire time, made jokes, and laughed. Leslie also remembered John rubbing Cheryl's shoulder during the game. According to Leslie, Cheryl and John were very affectionate to one another in public, and there were no signs which implied that something was wrong between them. In the days after the murder, Riley resigned from the school district and later moved away from Campbell County. He claimed that he was unaware of Cheryl's malicious scheme. In an interview, Sergeant Steve Rosier said, "It's as close to a murder mystery and probably better written than any I've read in a long time. Not that that's a good thing, but it certainly had a lot of twists and turns." Do you think that the detectives accurately figured out Cheryl's motive behind killing John, or do you think she took the real answers to her grave? Cheryl had been planning John's murder for months before it actually took place, What do you think led her to commit such a heinous act? Let us know your thoughts. We'd love to hear from you.
Listen, I need to speak to a copper first, because I think I've killed someone.
On July 3, 2012, a group of foreign students made a shocking discovery at Southsea Beach in Hampshire. They stumbled upon a male torso tightly wrapped in a pink shower curtain, hidden inside a plastic bin. The authorities faced a daunting challenge in identifying the victim, especially since more body parts were subsequently found scattered across different locations. It was a case that whispered secrets, concealed in the darkness, and challenged the very fabric of truth. Whose torso was wrapped in that curtain? How were the police finally able to solve the case? Hampshire is a county located on the southern coast of England. It's known for its beautiful countryside, historic landmarks, and vibrant cities. It has a population of over 1.8 million people, making it one of the most populous counties in the United Kingdom. Hampshire is also home to the famous seaside resorts of Portsmouth and Bournemouth. With its rich history, natural beauty, and cultural offerings, it attracts visitors from around the world. However, the crime rate in Hampshire is 6,713 incidents per 100,000 people. This place became a witness to a twisted crime that happened in July 2012. It was a sunny day on July 3, 2012, when a group of excited foreign students decided to make the most of their day off from school by visiting Southsea Beach in Hampshire. They were brimming with happiness and eagerly anticipating a time filled with joy and excitement. Little did they know that something unforgettable was about to cross their path. As the group of students decided to climb to the top of the beach rocks to capture picturesque moments, that's when their eyes caught something unusual in a nearby plastic bin. Fueled by curiosity, they approached the bin to investigate. They were surprised as they discovered a mysterious object concealed within. After carefully unwrapping the layers, they were taken aback to find a torso which was hidden in a pink shower curtain, tightly packed inside the bin. The students were frightened by their discovery and decided to leave the torso in the bin and quickly contacted the authorities. When the investigators arrived, the students shared the horrific story of how they stumbled upon the torso while taking pictures. The investigators quickly took out the wrapped torso from the bin and started to examine it. To their surprise, they discovered numerous cut marks along the edges, which suggested that the killer would have struggled or been hesitant while dismembering the body. The police conducted a thorough search of the area and meticulously combed through every nook and cranny. They also began questioning everyone who was present there in a hope to gather any information which could give them any clue about the perpetrator. Investigators asked the people if they saw any unusual sightings or any individual carrying something heavy which looked suspicious. However, to their disappointment, no one seemed to have noticed anything out of the ordinary, nor did anyone recall seeing any individual around at that particular time. The torso was then sent to the Home Office Registered Forensic Pathologist lab and it underwent a thorough examination. The pathologist meticulously studied the evidence. Although they were unable to determine the precise cause of death, they noticed the presence of marks on the torso, which suggested that the man had suffered a relentless and violent attack. Based on their analysis, they also deduced that this tragic incident would have occurred sometime between June 30th and July 3rd in 2012. Despite the lack of conclusive evidence from the torso, investigators turned their attention to the very item that had concealed the torso, the shower curtain. They started conducting tests on the curtain in hopes of uncovering any hidden clues that might help in the further investigation. To their surprise, they discovered 8 cat hairs on the curtain. However, there was a challenge. The genetic material in these hairs was mitochondrial DNA. Unlike regular DNA, which carries unique properties for precise matching, mitochondrial DNA contains only a small amount of its own genetic material. So, this made it difficult for them to determine a definitive match and posed the possibility of the DNA being shared among various animals.
Cat hairs are a bit problematic because they're basically very tiny. There's very little DNA within them, so you have to be exceedingly careful in how you do it, and it has to be done in a very clean environment.
Just 2 days after the unsettling discovery of the torso, an unkempt and distressed man appeared at Shoreham Police Station on July 5, 2012. Unfortunately, the station was closed at the time, but that also didn't deter him. He was determined to seek help, so he used a police free phone to contact the operators. He introduced himself as David Hilder and revealed that he resided on Richmond Road near Southsea Beach in Hampshire. In a trembling voice, he expressed his urgent need to speak with someone, as he confessed that he thought that he'd done something serious. Because when he woke up that morning, he found a lot of empty Nurofen wrappers in his pocket, which are used for removing body parts. He was confused about what he'd done, which caused him body pains. When the operators asked him about his well-being or if he needed an ambulance, Hilder responded that he needed to speak to a police officer first, as he thought that he'd killed someone.
Listen, I need to speak to a copper first, because I think I've killed someone.
Officer Stephen Miles, being alerted to the situation, promptly met Hilder outside the station when he got the news of his disturbing confession. Describing Hilder's visibly perplexed, Miles asked him what had actually happened, which had made him so confused and nervous. Hilder, exhibiting uncertainty, answered that he did not know about anything and he wasn't sure what he'd done. Hilder showed cooperation and entered the station voluntarily for further inquiry. Miles asked him about the whole scene and about whom he'd murdered. Hilder, in a state of fear, mentioned that he experienced unsettling flashbacks and suggested that he definitely had done something regrettable. Hilder even expressed his thoughts of self-harm, stating that if he'd done what he thought he'd done, then he was going to kill himself. However, when Miles pressed him for specifics about his actions, Hilder only responded with uncertainty, saying that he didn't know. Concerned about Hilder's mental well-being, the authorities decided to take him to the hospital as he expressed his fears of having taken an overdose of medicines. While Hilder was receiving medical attention, the police went to conduct a thorough search of his flat, which was on Richmond Road near Southsea. When they entered, the house was already in a disarray, but after the search, the police revealed that nothing suspicious was found within the premises. When Sussex police informed Hilder of their findings, a visible sense of relief washed over him. He said that it must have all been in his head then. When the medical checks were completed, Hilder was discharged from the hospital and escorted back to Richmond via train. However, destiny had a different plan in store, and his connection with the authorities was far from over. Undeterred by the challenges they faced, the investigators continued their search for the missing body parts of the torso. They returned to the crime scene and resumed their search along the shores of Southsea Beach. After intense efforts, on July 6, 2012, 3 days after the original discovery, police discovered a pair of legs in a different location on the beach. The forensics team meticulously combed the area and marked off sections with tape as they gathered evidence. It was a perplexing discovery. While the torso, legs, and pelvis had been recovered from 2 distinct spots, the remaining body, which included the head, arms, some internal organs, and genitalia which were cut off, were never found. After carefully examining and testing all the recovered body parts, forensic experts sent them to the pathologist's laboratory for further analysis. Through meticulous scientific procedures, they managed to extract a DNA sample from the victim's body parts. This valuable piece of evidence was then entered into their database, and they eagerly awaited for a potential identification. Finally, the murder surrounding the victim's identity was revealed. He was identified as David Guy, a 30-year-old individual who resided near the Southsea area. David Guy, born in 1982 in Hampshire, led a seemingly ordinary life filled with simple pleasures. Raised by his father Michael, not much is known about his family or personal life. However, according to his father, David possessed a gentle and caring nature from a young age. One of his favorite pastimes was swimming, and he'd often visit Southsea Beach, which held a special place in his heart. Little did anyone suspect that this beloved beach would become the stage for a mysterious and perplexing turn of events in David's own life. With a renewed sense of urgency, investigators swiftly made their way to Southsea, hoping to unravel more about Guy's life and potential connections. However, their search took an unexpected turn when an individual whose identity has not been disclosed approached them and shared a vital piece of information. He revealed that Guy had been residing in a friend's flat as he did not possess a place of his own. He also provided the address, and the police, without any delay, arrived at the designated location at Keelan Court on Richmond Road, only to be struck by a startling revelation. The flat belonged to David Hilder, the very man who'd confessed the previous day on July 5, 2012, that he'd taken someone's life. The perplexing connection between David Guy, the victim, and David Hilder, the man with a troubled state of mind, were raising numerous questions in the investigation. Investigators began their door-to-door inquiries, seeking for the answers regarding the relationship between Guy and Hilder. As they spoke with the residents there, a common thread emerged as they got to know that David Guy, 30 years old, and David Hilder, 46-year-old, were more than just acquaintances. They were friends with a history. Their friendship was characterized as a roller coaster ride, which was marked by highs and lows, and often volatile interactions. Interestingly, they were also known by distinct nicknames within their circle, with Hilder being referred to as Big Dave and Guy as Little Dave. They also revealed some additional details about Hilder on his occupation and peculiar habits. They described him as a scrap metal dealer, a person who was known for his presence in the neighborhood riding a bicycle. Also, he had a butcher's box which was securely attached to the handlebars of his bike. It was these distinctive characteristics that became part of Hilder's identity within the community. Further investigation unveiled a troubling history of violence. It was discovered that David Guy would often rely on Hilder for food and a place to shower, while his responsibility was to take care of Hilder's cat named Tinker. Little did he know that the seemingly innocent task would lead him down a twisted path of danger and deceit. Often, when Hilder returned home and found his flat in disarray and his cat Tinker neglected, he'd resort to physically assaulting Guy. The evidence gathered during the investigation strongly implicated Hilder in the murder of Guy. On July 8th, Hampshire police made the decisive move of arresting Hilder, considering him as the prime suspect in the murder case of Guy. However, when police confronted him with the accusations, Hilder vehemently denied any involvement in the death or dismemberment of David Guy. The details surrounding his arrest were kept under wraps by the police, leaving the public curious about the unfolding mystery. Finally, after a year of anticipation, the truth behind Hilder's arrest came to light in July 2013. Hilder faced trial at Winchester Crown Court, where he was charged with the murder of David Guy. As the trial proceeded, it was revealed that Hilder had meticulously dismembered the body of Guy. The act was described as being carefully planned and carried out with intention. Hilder used his unique bicycle with a front-mounted butcher's block to move the body parts to different places in South Sea Beach. The trial informed the jurors that Guy's head, arms, and certain internal organs were severed and remained missing to this day. During the trial, the police informed the jurors that when they searched Hilder's flat in Southsea on July 5, 2012, after his confession of killing someone, they discovered some fibers of the same curtain that was matching the curtain in which the torso of David Guy was wrapped. They also found a cat in the flat, which raised their suspicions since 8 cat hairs were found during the initial testing of the curtain. To gather more evidence, they collected some hair samples from the cat. Along with that, they also found some traces of blood on the floor and collected it for further analysis. However, they chose not to disclose these findings to Hilder, as they didn't want to alert him or compromise the ongoing investigation. They wanted to keep the details and progress of the investigation a secret until they had more certainty. On July 6, 2012, the investigators decided to send all the evidence to the Veterinary Genetics Laboratory at the University of California, which was famous for using animal DNA to catch criminals for more than a decade. Dr. John Wetton, who'd previously helped us set up a similar database for dogs, collaborated with doctoral student Barbara Ottolini to establish a database specifically for cat DNA related to the Hilder's case. They collected samples of mitochondrial DNA from 152 cats in various locations across England within a span of 6 weeks. Out of the numerous cat DNA samples collected, Wetton revealed that only 3 of them matched the DNA of the hairs found on the curtain. Although the match wasn't completely identical, it provided a strong indication that the hairs belonged to Hilder's cat, Tinker. Wetton stated that for the first time in the UK, cat DNA was used in a criminal trial, making a significant advancement in forensic science. With approximately 10 million cats residing in the country, their hairs unknowingly serve as tiny tags on clothes and furniture in over a quarter of households. This discovery opened up new possibilities for connecting individuals to specific locations and items through the transfer of their pets' hairs, offering valuable insights for investigations. Furthermore, investigators also found additional evidence in the form of blood traces at Hilder's home. The DNA analysis confirmed that the blood belonged to David Guy, which provided crucial evidence to support his connection to the crime. With this significant piece of evidence, authorities were able to secure a conviction against Hilder, who was 47 years old at the time. During the trial, jurors were informed about Hilder's mild learning disability and his low IQ of 63. It was revealed that he also struggled with bouts of depression. The exact details surrounding David Guy's death remained unclear, but it was suggested that there could have been a quarrel between Hilder and Guy, which led to a sudden loss of self-control. Hilder allegedly stabbed Guy through the chest with a sharp blade, resulting in his immediate death. Subsequently, Hilder was also accused of mutilating and dismembering David Guy's body. Stuart Ellicott, a Crown advocate for the Crown Prosecution Service, stated that the exact dynamics of their relationship may forever remain a mystery. Witnesses also characterized their friendship as a complex mix of love and hate, wherein Hilder, who provided David Guy with food and access to washing facilities, but also exhibited violent tendencies towards him. According to the prosecution, Hilder held a position of dominance in their friendship and would resort to violence as a means of punishing his younger friend who relied on him for support. At Winchester Crown Court on July 30, 2013, after taking all the details of the case into account, David Hilder, aged 47, was declared to be not guilty of the murder of David Guy, but was convicted of manslaughter. This means that although he did not have a specific intention to commit murder, he was still responsible for causing the death. Hilder was sentenced to a minimum of 12 years in prison. But after just 8 months in prison, Hilder made an appeal to have his sentence overturned, as he hoped for a conventional jail term instead. However, in February 2014, the judges at the Criminal Appeal Court decided to uphold his sentence. The appeal would have been successful if Hilder would have served only half of his sentence automatically. The decision meant that he would continue to serve the full sentence as originally imposed. Lord Justice Fulford emphasized the importance of the sentence, stating that it was necessary due to Hilder's significant risk of causing serious harm to others. He explained that whenever Hilder experienced feelings of depression and encountered triggering events that provoked anger, it would result in an extremely violent reaction. This insight into Hilder's behavior and the potential danger he posed played a crucial role in upholding the life sentence. The judges recognized that the circumstances which led to Hilder's violent actions could potentially occur again in the future. Despite being sentenced 10 years ago in 2013, Hilder's expected to be released in just 2 more years, specifically in 2025. This highlights the need for ongoing vigilance and consideration of the potential risks which are associated with his release. Michael, the father of David Guy, expressed his profound sorrow and grief after the loss of his son. He acknowledged that with time, he may find a way to cope with his loss. However, he revealed that the most distressing aspect he cannot come to terms with is the brutal dismemberment of his son's body. This act of violence has left an indelible pain in his soul, a burden he knows he will carry for the remainder of his life. Detective Superintendent Dick Pearson from Hampshire Constabulary emphasized the significant role played by DNA evidence, including the cat hairs discovered at crucial locations, in the investigation. He acknowledged that this case has had a lasting impact on David Guy's family, who were determined to find ways to cope with the tragic events. The family continued to grapple with the profound challenge of coming to terms with the heartbreaking ordeal they've endured. The case serves as a reminder of the complex nature of criminal investigations and the enduring impact it has on the families affected. What are your thoughts on this case? Did Hilder kill David Guy intentionally, or was he really unaware of his act? We'd love to hear from you.
I ran outside the door and slammed it shut, and I was in shock. I remember I was staggering, going from apartment to apartment, pounding on the door, just screaming, and finally somebody let me inside, and I called 911.
Imagine going about your daily routine, completely unaware of the dark secrets that lie hidden within the walls of your home. The laughter, the tears, the moments of joy and sadness that have unfolded in that very space, oblivious to the horrors that transpired years before. Such was the case for the occupants of a seemingly ordinary apartment until tragedy struck and shattered their sense of security forever. In 1992, Christy Mirack, a vibrant 25-year-old teacher at Lancaster County Elementary School, met a chilling fate within the confines of her own dwelling. This is a true story of a teacher who was murdered in her own apartment. Her case grew colder and colder as time passed, and the search for justice continued for 27 long years. Who could have committed such an act? Was it someone close to Christy, or was it someone she'd never encountered in her life before? Nestled in the heart of Pennsylvania lies a place known for its tranquil charm and close-knit community. This is Lancaster, a captivating region where the echoes of the past mingle with the vibrant tapestry of the present. The people of Lancaster embody a spirit of warmth and neighborliness, their friendly smiles and open hearts making this place feel like home. It's amidst this idyllic backdrop, where doors are left unlocked and safety seems assured, that a heinous crime shattered the peace, sending shockwaves through the very fabric of this serene community. Christy Mirack, a 25-year-old committed teacher from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, was born on November 3, 1967. Apart from their daughter Christy, her father Vincent and mother Jerry had two other children, Vince and Alicia. She grew up to be a kind and lively person and had a loving family. As a devoted teacher at Rowerston Elementary School, her enthusiasm for her work radiated with each passing day. Christy began as a substitute teacher and rapidly showed her natural ability for the job, gaining her a permanent position in no time. Her bond with her students, particularly those in 6th grade, was profound. Christy had worked hard to make ends meet before her tragic death, balancing various jobs to support herself. She'd worked as a part-time server at the exclusive Conestoga Country Club and as an assistant to the pharmacist at the Neffsville Pharmacy. Her desire to become an extraordinary teacher was fueled by the rigorous nature of her employment. Christy pursued her passion for teaching with tenacity and found herself in front of a 6th grade class at Rowerston Elementary School. Her zeal and devotion could be seen in the way she nourished young minds and worked to make a difference in their lives. The cheerful occasion of a scheduled Christmas party with her pupils, however, took a frightening turn when Christy failed to show up at work that day. The disappearance caused concern across the school, spurring a chaotic search for their beloved instructor. On that chilly Monday, December 21st, 1992, just 4 days before Christmas, anticipation filled the air as 25-year-old Christy Mirack prepared for her day ahead. Christy had meticulously prepared gifts for her cherished students with Christmas pleasure in her heart. They were carefully wrapped and awaited distribution when she arrived at school that morning. However, as the hours passed without her arrival, the school community became concerned. Christy and her roommate shared a Greenfield Estates flat in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. Christy had recently relocated from her birthplace of Shamokin to seek a teaching profession, and she'd settled into her new surroundings. She began her morning ritual each day, savoring breakfast and catching up on the day's news. Her flatmate would usually leave for work around 7 a.m., followed by Christy around 7:45 a.m. Christy's absence at school caused Principal Harry Goodman to reach out, making many fruitless attempts to locate her. He called Christy's mother, hoping for news, as he became increasingly concerned. Alas, her mother had not heard from her either. Concern gripping his heart, Harry embarked on a journey to Christy's apartment, desperate to uncover the truth. As Harry entered Christy's flat, he was confronted with a scene of chaos. The living area, which had previously been decked with beautifully wrapped gifts, was now in shambles as if the happy expectation had been ruthlessly broken. And there, on the floor, lay Christy herself. Harry's instincts spurred him into action as he was overwhelmed by the dreadful scene unfolding before him. Desperate for help, he dashed to a nearby apartment complex and dialed 911, his voice resonating with urgency. With shock vibrations still flowing through his veins, he murmured the haunting words, "Her face." Harry told 2020, "I told the police what I saw, but I've never told anyone else what I walked in on. I struggled for years with this. Screaming nightmares." The terrifying sight carved itself deep into his soul, plaguing him for years to come. Christy Mirack's harsh and merciless attack left an unmistakable impact on the crime scene. When the cops came, they were faced with a terrifying sight. Christy was dead on the living room floor. As they examined her bruised corpse, the horrible reality became clear. She'd been assaulted and violently beaten, with her face and neck receiving the brunt of the damage. The postmortem report painted a bleak picture of the trauma inflicted on Christy. Intriguingly, Christy was discovered wearing gloves, suggesting that she may have been on the verge of leaving her house before the killer forced her back inside and attacked her. The presence of the wooden cutting board near her lifeless form painted a picture of an emotionally driven and disorganized perpetrator. A key lead developed as the investigators probed deeper into Christy's personal life. It was found that she'd been romantically connected with an older guy known as Dagger, who was the president of the local Teamsters Union. This discovery provided a new degree of complexity to the evolving story, raising concerns about potential motives and links. The timing of the incident was maybe the most terrifying element of it. It happened during the day, inside a 45-minute window between Christy's typical leaving time for work and her roommate's regular departure time. This information suggested that the culprit had been actively following Christy's moves, either as an acquaintance who knew her itinerary or as a methodical observer, waiting for the right moment to strike. In the midst of dwindling hopes and dwindling leads, a ray of optimism rose in the investigation into Christy Mirack's terrible murder. The discovery of DNA evidence within her flat presented the possibility of a breakthrough, but the limits of forensic science in 1992 impeded rapid advancement. With the principal, recognized acquaintances, and even a discreet older suitor quickly ruled out as suspects, the investigation appeared to come to a halt. An eyewitness narrative emerged, providing a dramatic view into the morning of the crime. A woman strolling near Christy's apartment saw a man who suited a specific description. A stocky, muscular figure in his late 20s with long, stringy hair cascading over his chest and deep-set eyes. This intriguing guy, dressed in a faded blue, white, and black shirt and blue pants, drew the attention of all who saw him. A white car with black louvers covering the back window, like a Dodge Daytona, was observed parked across the street from the flat, which provided another vital piece of the jigsaw. Nonetheless, despite significant efforts to find the car and the unidentified guy, there were no lucky advancements in the case, its strands unraveling in the face of limited clues and waning hope. Unfortunately, her case fell cold owing to a lack of evidence and no leads. It wasn't until a few years ago the police decided to employ modern DNA technology to assist them pinpoint the killer's genetic phenotype. It wasn't until 2015 that a renewed spark ignited the investigation, with Lancaster County District Attorney Craig Stedman reopening the case. Recognizing the advancements in DNA testing since 1992, Stedman sought a fresh perspective, a glimmer of opportunity in the unsolved mystery that had haunted the community for decades. Enter C.C. Moore, a renowned genealogist known for her instrumental role in solving cold cases through innovative genetic techniques. Teaming up with Parabon Nanolabs, Moore embarked on a groundbreaking journey, uploading the DNA evidence discovered on Christy's body and within her apartment to GEDmatch, a database connecting individuals through their shared genetic heritage. Delving deep into the vast network of family connections, Moore meticulously crafted an intricate family tree, tracing distant relatives linked to the DNA found at the crime scene. Tirelessly scouring newspaper archives, she sought any mention of individuals from the target family, driven by the conviction that answers lay hidden within the tapestry of time. Her perseverance paid off when an engagement announcement surfaced, linking a man to the target family. Yet it was the revelation of his father's Latin American heritage, juxtaposed with the mother's Northern European lineage, that provided a tantalizing breakthrough. A seemingly insignificant online magazine interview further solidified Moore's suspicions, as the subject disclosed his mixed Puerto Rican heritage, a detail that aligned with the ancestral mix she'd been seeking. In that remarkable convergence of painstaking research and technological innovation, the path to justice seemed to reveal itself. The story of Christy Mirack's murder took a riveting turn as the identity of her killer appeared to emerge from the shadows. The tireless efforts of investigators, the marvels of modern forensic techniques, and the unwavering dedication of individuals like C.C. Moore transformed a long-dormant case into a race against time to ensure that the truth would finally prevail. A suspect presented himself as a possible turning point in the painstaking network of inquiry and the unrelenting quest for justice. Law enforcement's meticulous work led them to a man whose DNA needed to be examined to confirm the connection. They followed him, watching his every move in anticipation of the right time to get the essential information that would either support or refute their suspicions. Their vigilance paid off when the suspect, 49-year-old Raymond Charles Rowe, took center stage at a school event, showcasing his skills as a DJ. Little did he know that his seemingly innocuous actions could provide the key to unlocking the truth. As the event concluded, he casually discarded a water bottle and a piece of gum, unwittingly leaving behind traces of his genetic identity. The results of the subsequent DNA examination would reveal if Rowe's DNA profile matched the evidence discovered at the crime scene. As the results came in, breaking the years-long hush around the case, the suspense was tremendous. The undeniable truth emerged. Rowe's DNA was a match. In a dramatic turn of events, the arrest of Raymond Charles Rowe in June 2018 reverberated through the community. As the wheels of justice turned, the case took an unexpected twist. Raymond Charles Rowe, having initially pleaded guilty for the 1992 rape and been sentenced to life in prison, chose to retract his plea in 2018. In a bid to establish his innocence, Rowe's defense team filed a petition seeking post-conviction DNA testing, hoping that the results would shed new light on the case. However, after a failed attempt, Raymond Charles Rowe pleaded guilty in 2019 to the killing and related charges. Judge Dennis E. Reinacre, who was in charge, carefully considered the petition before rejecting it. Rowe's failure to comply with the post-conviction DNA testing statute's obligations was a key factor in Reinacre's conclusion. The judge came to the conclusion that the necessary testing could have been completed before Rowe entered a guilty plea, since touch DNA testing equipment was already in place. Reinacre further emphasized that Rowe's proposed enhanced next-generation DNA sequencing method had only a narrow range of applications and was inappropriate in this particular situation. As the pursuit of truth reached a critical juncture, Judge Dennis E. Reinacre delivered a resolute opinion on Raymond Charles Rowe's claim of actual innocence. Reinacre delved into the intricate details of the crime scene, the state of Christy Mirack's body, and the condition of her townhome. He scrutinized Rowe's ever-shifting narrative, highlighting the pivotal moment when Rowe himself confessed to having snapped during an interview with defense investigators following his 2018 arrest. Reinacre also underscored Rowe's statements made during his guilty plea, further complicating the tangled web of events. In a firm and unequivocal manner, Reinacre stated that Rowe had failed to establish a prima facie case of actual innocence. The wealth of evidence presented by the prosecution, including Rowe's own words and the incriminating DNA left behind, shattered any notion of his innocence. Reinacre's ruling firmly rejected the potential significance of DNA found on the items surrounding Mirack's lifeless body at the murder scene. The bereaved family may find some measure of comfort in this court ruling, but District Attorney Heather Adams noted that the road ahead is still long. She stressed the likelihood of more legal challenges while acknowledging that this decision is probably just the first round of a drawn-out appellate process. As the dust settles, the items at the center of this dispute will remain untested, leaving Rowe behind bars. However, he retains a slender lifeline with the opportunity to appeal Reinacre's ruling to the Superior Court within 30 days. The future of this complex murder case hangs in the balance, awaiting the next chapter in this ongoing saga. In this real-life saga of relentless investigation and scientific breakthroughs, the story of a murder case transformed into a riveting pursuit for truth and accountability. The dedication of law enforcement, coupled with the advances in forensic technology, propelled the search for justice forward, unraveling the enigma that had plagued the community for years. Do you think justice was finally served in Christy Mirack's case? What do you think about the impact of unsolved murders on the victims' families?
Bruce was my brother. He's my youngest brother. Me and my brother were close. We were tight. Bruce is not the type of person to just go off and not let anybody know where he was going and what he was doing. The fear started to set in when I had not heard from my brother.
On March 6, 2006, a 55-year-old man named Bruce Blackwood disappeared without a trace from Queens, New York. His friends and family were left searching for answers, but little did they know that his killer had been living among them the entire time. For 9 years, the truth behind Blackwood's disappearance remained a mystery until shocking evidence surfaced, revealing the gruesome details of his murder. What was that evidence, and how was it connected to Bruce's disappearance? Queens is one of the 5 boroughs of New York City, located on the western end of Long Island. It's the longest borough in the area and the second most populous, with a diverse population of over 2.3 million people. Queens is known for its ethnic diversity, rich culture, and world-famous attractions, including Citi Field, Flushing Meadows Corona Park, and the Louis Armstrong House Museum. It's also home to 2 of the city's major airports, JFK International Airport and LaGuardia Airport. However, this beautiful borough witnessed a gruesome murder on March 7, 2006, that remained a mystery for a long time. It was a chilly evening on March 6, 2006. Bruce Blackwood's phone rang. It was his longtime friend, Diana Mason Smith. As they chatted about their week, Bruce couldn't help but bring up a recent issue with his bank checks. He divulged that the handyman he hired for his property in Brooklyn had been forging checks in his name, and he planned to confront the shady contractor. Despite Diana's warnings to be cautious, Bruce was determined to take matters into his own hands. Bruce Blackwood was a man who wore many hats in the bustling city of New York. Living in the vibrant neighborhood of Queens, he owned several properties in the city that never sleeps. But that wasn't all. Bruce was also a valued member of the Off-Track Betting Corporation, where he held the position of restaurant supervisor at O'Neill's Restaurant in Maspeth, Queens since 2004. Whether it was managing his properties or overseeing the dining experience of customers, Bruce was a man who knew how to get the job done.
Bruce was a very caring, loving person. He had a great sense of humor. He always wanted to help people, and he always wanted to make friends. He had a lot of friends.
On that fateful Monday morning of March 7, 2006, Bruce Blackwood did something out of the ordinary. He picked up the phone and called his workplace around 10:45 a.m., an off-site betting establishment where he worked as a manager. His voice was shaky as he informed his colleagues that he'd not be able to make it to work as he was suddenly taken ill. It was a brief call, but something about it felt off. Had something happened to Bruce? Was he in trouble? His colleagues couldn't help but wonder. Diana's mind was in a worry about the fact when he went to confront one of the handymen and was concerned about his safety. So she called Bruce to find out about the details of what had happened and if he was all right. But her worries turned into panic when her phone went straight to voicemail. She immediately called his workplace, and the person who picked up informed her that Bruce said he slipped and fell in the bathtub and he had to go to the hospital because of a head injury, so he couldn't make it into work. After hearing this, she became really worried for Bruce. The next day, when Bruce didn't show up for work again, her apprehension reached its peak.
After not hearing from him for a couple of days, I was in a complete panic. He was just gone.
Diana took matters into her own hands and called Edward Blackwood, Bruce's brother, to share her concerns. She expressed her worries about Bruce's sudden disappearance since March 6, 2006, and how he hadn't shown up since then. Diana hoped that Ed would have some insight into Bruce's whereabouts and well-being. As soon as Ed Blackwood realized that his brother Bruce was missing, he knew that something was amiss.
A friend of his told me that she had not heard from Bruce, and did I hear from Bruce? within those 2 days. And I said, no, something may have happened to Bruce.
He immediately went to the police to file a missing person report, hoping that they'd be able to find his brother. The detectives on the case soon found out that Bruce was a man of means with a considerable real estate portfolio worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Ed Blackwood wasted no time and went to the building his brother owned in Bushwick, where he rallied a group of family and friends to help him search for Bruce. They made some flyers featuring a picture of Bruce and a plea for anyone who may have seen him to come forward. The team fanned out across the city, determined to find any leads that would help them solve the case. The detectives were determined to solve the case of Bruce Blackwood.
I don't feel that he had any kind of enemies that would cause him to disappear.
They knew that if Bruce had any kind of conflict, it was most likely with his tenants. So they hit the pavement and started interviewing neighbors and tenants in the area. They were especially interested in talking to people who didn't pay rent, complained, or threatened lawsuits, and anyone who could be a possible enemy of Bruce. They were leaving no stone unturned in their search for Bruce. They knew that tensions between landlords and tenants could run high, and that disputes over rent or maintenance could escalate quickly. So they carefully questioned each tenant, looking for any signs of animosity towards Bruce. They listened intently to each person's story, taking note of any hints of resentment or anger that could point toward a possible motive for murder. The handyman told detectives that he saw Bruce Blackwood on Tuesday, the following day on March 7, 2006.
The handyman told detectives that he saw Mr. Blackwood on Tuesday, the following day, which would be March 7th.
As they listened intently, he recounted the details of their conversation. According to him, Bruce had arrived at the house at around 9:30 or 10 o'clock in the morning. As they discussed renovations, the handyman noticed that Bruce seemed distracted, as if he had something else on his mind. It wasn't until Bruce mentioned he had to take a ride somewhere to run errands that the handyman began to suspect that something might be wrong. He observed Bruce Blackwood leave the building and get into the passenger seat of a sleek black Toyota Camry. As the car drove away, the handyman couldn't help but wonder who the mysterious driver was. He'd never seen him before, and something about the man's demeanor gave him an uneasy feeling. Little did he know, this would be the last time he would see Bruce Blackwood alive. The night before Bruce Blackwood went missing, a neighborhood witness reported a disturbing scene. He saw Bruce involved in a heated argument with two Hispanic men in his driveway. The witness, who was standing a few houses down, could hear raised voices and see hand gestures as the men yelled at Bruce. The witness recognized one of the men as a worker who'd done some renovations on Bruce's house. The other man was a stranger to him. The witness had a bad feeling about the situation and decided to call the police. But by the time they arrived, the argument had ended and everyone had dispersed. Detectives investigating Bruce Blackwood's disappearance began to suspect that money may have played a role in his sudden disappearance. They dug deeper into his finances and discovered that Bruce had recently purchased a property in February 2006 in Brooklyn, New York, with plans to renovate and rent it out. So he placed an ad looking for a handyman, which led to Luis Perez. Bruce eventually hired him and let him live on the property while the renovations happened. Luis Perez, the man he hired, had started stealing from Bruce by writing checks to himself from Bruce's checkbook. As the detectives delved deeper into this financial aspect, they wondered if this theft had something to do with Bruce's sudden disappearance. The detectives were hot on the trail of the missing checks and headed straight to the American Airlines credit union that Bruce had visited before his disappearance, and their hunch was confirmed. There, they discovered a trail of fraudulent activity. The teller pulled up his file on the computer and confirmed that Bruce had reported 13 missing checks. And the teller's account confirmed that Bruce had indeed been there, looking frazzled and worried. The detectives realized that the motive for Bruce's disappearance might not have been as simple as a personal conflict.
A total of 13 personal checks that were fraudulently signed, or forged checks.
So they looked into Luis Perez's past and discovered a shocking truth. He'd already spent a decade behind bars for attempting to kill his own wife and daughter in Massachusetts. Apparently, he'd been stopped by state troopers, but in a fit of rage, he'd stabbed one of the troopers. But he was then released on parole. With this new information, it was clear that Lewis was not a man to be taken lightly. After weeks of waiting, the phone records of Bruce Blackwood finally arrived on May 2, 2006. As they went through the calls, one in particular caught their attention. The call Bruce had made to his workplace, claiming that he couldn't come in because he had slipped in the bathtub.
We were able to triangulate that call, and he was hitting off a cell phone tower approximately 2 blocks away from the Hancock Street location. We believed that he was actually inside and that he was with Luis Perez.
As the investigation progressed, detectives were unable to prove that Bruce Blackwood was murdered, but they had a breakthrough when they discovered evidence of a theft. It was evident that someone had been stealing from Bruce, and after some time, the detectives obtained copies of all the forged checks. The handwriting analysis concluded that Luis Perez was the one who wrote out those checks. The detectives wasted no time in arresting Luis on June 20, 2006, and charged him with multiple counts of grand larceny and forgery. They also secured a search warrant for Bruce's residence. They knew that this was the last place where Bruce Blackwood was seen alive and where detectives believed Bruce would have been murdered. The detectives entered the apartment at 983 Hancock Street and also the crime unit to discover any clues. They peeled away the carpeting and searched every nook and cranny, hoping to find any clue. The sink traps and shower drain pipes were pulled apart as the investigators carefully examined every inch. But despite their thorough efforts, there was nothing that they found that could provide any real answers. The mystery of Bruce Blackwood's disappearance seemed to grow deeper and more perplexing with every passing day. 2 years later, Luis was released on parole.
Everything led back to Perez. But when you can't even find the body and you don't have that one witness, you have nothing.
In 2011, a town hall meeting became a turning point for the investigation into Bruce Blackwood's disappearance. Police Commissioner Raymond Kelly was in attendance when Ed Blackwood, Bruce's brother, and a retired detective who he'd hired as a private investigator, spoke out about the police department's lack of interest in the case. Ed boldly pointed out that perhaps the reason for the lack of urgency was due to Bruce's race. Shortly after, Wendell Stratford was summoned to police headquarters and tasked with taking over the case. This marked a new beginning for the investigation, driven by a determination to uncover the truth, no matter the circumstances. He wasn't going to be satisfied with just going through the motions like the previous detectives. He interviewed everyone mentioned in the case file, from family members to acquaintances, and cast a wider net by exploring other avenues, such as banks and credit card companies. He refused to be limited by a narrow focus on a single suspect, instead widening his scope and considering all possibilities. They'd been going around interviewing different people. It was July 2011 when Detective Stratford was in a hospital when his phone rang. It was the precinct. His heart quickened as he answered the call, expecting an update on the investigation. Instead, the voice on the other end informed him that someone was there to talk about the case. The detective's mind raced as he wondered if the killer had finally been caught, or if it was just another dead-end lead. He rushed out of the hospital, ready to chase down the next lead in the case.
He goes, "This is Detective such and such from the 7-3 precinct." I go, "Yeah, what can I do for you?" He goes, "Someone says she knows about one of your murders."
Irene Perez was the daughter of Luis Perez. She found out that the detectives had been asking around about Bruce Blackwood's disappearance. Irene made a startling confession to the detectives. With a nervous tremble in her voice, she revealed that she'd overheard her father speaking about the murder of Bruce Blackwood. The detectives were taken aback by this sudden revelation, as they'd never been certain that Blackwood had been murdered. But with this new piece of information, the case took a dramatic turn. It was time to bring Luis Perez in for questioning and get to the bottom of what really happened to Bruce Blackwood. The daughter of Luis Perez revealed the shocking truth. She had a recording of her father confessing to the murder of Bruce Blackwood. With trembling hands, she pulled out her cell phone and played the recording. The sound was muffled and distorted, like it had been buried in a pile of clothes. But there was no mistaking the words that came out of Luis's mouth. Even though the quality of the recording was poor, they could hear the hint of guilt in Luis's voice as he spoke of a life taken and a haunting secret that had been a mystery for years. With chilling detail in 2004, Luis Perez confessed to his daughter the gruesome truth of how he'd ended Bruce Blackwood's life in that very apartment.
And he told me, the police is going to come and get me and arrest me. So now,
Luis Perez knew what he was doing when he murdered Bruce Blackwood.
I said, let me put him on the dope, let me put him to sleep like this. I just hit you hard. Man.
He used bleach to ensure that there was no evidence in the drains and carefully lined the apartment with plastic to avoid leaving any trace. Even when he dismembered Blackwood with a saw, he was careful not to leave a single drop of blood.
We knew that he had gotten rid of his body and that he had done a good job in getting rid of it. There was no forensic evidence whatsoever, meaning not even a blood trail.
It was as if the crime scene had been scrubbed clean by a professional cleaner. He revealed that he used an alarming amount of chemicals, including 12 cans of Drano, 15 bottles of liquid bleach, and 2 boxes of dust bleach, just to cover his tracks. He boasted about spending 5 hours cleaning the room where he committed the murder, even using fabric softener to cover up the smell of bleach. It was apparent that he'd put a great deal of thought into disposing of the evidence, even borrowing an industrial carpet cleaner from his neighbor. The killer went on to discuss the best surfaces for killing someone and admitted that he faced a challenge with the wall-to-wall rugs in the room where he committed the murder.
Plastic that I put down is a construction plastic. The real thick plastic, I put it on the floor and I use the shelter.
In a twisted and macabre plan, Luis Perez enlisted the help of unwitting homeless people to dispose of the remains of his victim, Bruce Blackwood. He paid them off and they unknowingly carried bags containing the dismembered body parts to different locations scattered throughout the area. It was a cunning strategy that Luis had devised, ensuring that the evidence was spread thin and would be impossible to trace. And yet, despite his meticulous planning, justice eventually caught up with him.
I cleaned that whole room, bleached the walls and everything. I used garbage bags with the bottom unit. Everything went in the garbage. And the garbage broke.
As the murder trial of Luis Perez finally began on September 8, 2015, after 9.5 long years, the police finally managed to locate some crucial witnesses to aid the prosecution. One such witness was Martin Rodriguez, Luis's former assistant who was meek and timid and who seemed to be perpetually looking over his shoulder. He was clearly terrified of Luis, who he believed was after him. However, it was evident that Martin had nothing to do with the gruesome murder of Bruce Blackwood. Luis's daughter, Irene, took the stand to reveal what her father told her about the gruesome and terrible details, everything that he did to Bruce Blackwood. But the jury needed to hear the recording in his own voice. The Brooklyn Supreme Courtroom was filled with tension as the jury listened to the chilling audio recording of Luis Perez confessing to his daughter about the murder of Bruce Blackwood. The recording lasted for 3 hours, and Luis described in gruesome detail how he'd killed and dismembered Bruce, all because he didn't want to go back to prison. Luis himself admitted on the recording that the murder wasn't something he'd planned, but rather something he did out of fear of being arrested by the police. She asked him about the plastic sheets he laid down in the apartment and the bleach he poured down the drains to clean up the mess. When she asked him about the machete, his response was chillingly matter-of-fact. "I had to." He knew that a saw could make a mess, so he took precautions.
Yeah, the sauce on the machete. I had to, because when I started using sauce on the skin, it was just good thing to make it out of mess. I didn't machete do it, all I did was slice it like a piece of chicken. When I used the sauce on.
With gloves on, he carefully disassembled the saw in the tub, pouring bleach powder and dust on it before washing it down. The water turned orange, indicating the presence of blood, but Luis was methodical in his approach. He soaked the saw in the dust, waited patiently, and washed everything down like a seasoned cleaner. It was as if the murder was nothing more than a stain that needed to be removed. The jury listened in stunned silence as Luis's admission of his gruesome and meticulous actions filled the courtroom.
I said, let me put him on the dope, let me put him to sleep like this. I just You are in a man.
As Luis Perez calmly recounted the gruesome details of how he dismembered Bruce Blackwood's body, his daughter Irene couldn't hide her shock and disgust. She confronted him about his reckless actions, telling him he was doing everything wrong and that he was going to end up back in jail. But Luis remained unrepentant, telling her that it was too late to dwell on what couldn't be fixed. As if it was just another mundane task, he mentioned that he even took a cigarette break after the gruesome slaying was complete. The last trial for Bruce Blackwood's murder took a dramatic turn when an explosive prison phone call was played in court. Defendant Luis Perez urged his daughter to lie and claimed she was threatened to avoid a conviction. The conversation was translated from Spanish and read by the assistant district attorney to the stunned jurors, revealing Luis's desperation to stay out of prison and further cementing the case against him. Finally, on September 28, 2015, after 21 days of trial, Luis Perez was found guilty of second-degree murder in the 2006 killing of Bruce Blackwood. The jury deliberated for a mere 3 hours before reaching their verdict, citing the damning evidence presented before them. Despite the seriousness of the charge, Luis remained stoic and emotionless as the verdict was read aloud in court. On October 13, 2015, Luis Perez was sentenced to 25 years behind bars, leaving behind the world he once knew. Now confined to the Attica Correctional Facility in New York, he spends his days locked away from society, with no chance of parole until the distant year of 2039. The weight of his actions have finally caught up with him, and he's left to ponder the gravity of his crimes.
I didn't have a body to bury. My brother was chopped up, and for him to be stuffed in bags like he was a piece of garbage, to be destroyed like that, that hurt really, really tremendously.
Edward Blackwood delivered a powerful statement directed at Luis Perez, calling him a monster and a being of pure evil. He spoke of the jealousy that consumed Luis and wished for him to rot in jail for the rest of his life. Edward expressed the pain of losing his brother Bruce and how his absence will be felt forever. DA Ken Thompson hailed the verdict as a beacon of hope for justice and closure for Bruce Blackwood's loved ones. The prosecution's determination and the jury's attention to detail led to a resounding victory. The defendant's chilling words on tape were the key to unlocking the truth. The crime of cutting up a human body and disposing of it cannot go unpunished. Bruce Blackwood's memory will forever reverberate in the halls of justice.
Luis Perez was sentenced to 25 to life, and that was the maximum sentence that was allowable under the law. So there is some justice there.
The case of Luis Perez and the murder of Bruce Blackwood is a chilling reminder of the brutal and senseless crimes that can occur in our own neighborhoods. The audio recordings played a crucial role in securing Luis's conviction, and justice was served for the victim and his family.
The LAPD has released bizarre surveillance footage of 21-year-old Elisa Lam.
It shows 21-year-old Elisa Lam acting erratically, getting into an elevator and pressing several buttons. At one point, she appears to hide and also gets in and out of that elevator a number of times. It was taken at the beginning of Lam's trip to Los Angeles, just before she went missing.
On January 26, 2013, a young woman checked into a renowned hotel in downtown Los Angeles. But within 4 days of her arrival, she disappeared. Elisa Lam, a 21-year-old Canadian student, was on a solo adventure that took her to the Cecil Hotel. It was an establishment already abuzz with a dark history, and Elisa's disappearance, reported on February 1, 2013, didn't help its reputation. The woman had vanished, but it was not the only terrifying thing. She was captured on a CCTV camera, and what followed seemed like something out of a horror movie. Was something chasing her, or was this really some sort of paranormal activity? What happened to Elisa within the walls of the Cecil Hotel? Los Angeles, California has always been a melting pot of cultures, attracting people from all walks of life. The city's always embodied a mix of glamour, entertainment, and grit. Its residents range from aspiring artists and actors chasing their dreams to hardworking professionals seeking opportunities. And in the heart of downtown Los Angeles is the infamous Cecil Hotel, within a diversely populated area and a vibrant atmosphere. The Cecil Hotel, built in 1924, has a rich and complex history. In 2011, it was renamed as the Stay on Main Hotel. Over the years, it witnessed its share of dark and unsettling events, with more than 15 unexplained deaths in or around the hotel. Not only that, 2 serial killers have taken refuge in the rooms of the Cecil Hotel in the past. Therefore, it earned a reputation for being associated with crime and tragedy. Despite its troubled past, the hotel continued to attract customers and stands as an historical landmark, captivating the curiosity of those fascinated by its eerie allure. Within the walls of this 14-storied hotel, a new customer brought in yet another tragic story in 2013. Born as Lam Ho Yi on April 30, 1991, Elisa Lam was full of adventure. Her roots trace back to Hong Kong, from where her parents, David and Yina Lam, had journeyed with her and her sister, Sarah, in search of a brighter future. The Lam family eventually settled in Vancouver, British Columbia, in the vast expanse of Canada. The world of fashion attracted her, so around mid-2010, she started a blog named Ether Fields on Blogspot, where she shared photos of trendy outfits and fashionable models. In addition to that, she used her blog as a platform to talk about her personal struggles with mental illness. After 2 years of operating that account, in January 2012, Elisa talked about her relapse when her school term started. Quoting novelist Chuck Palahniuk, she wrote in her post, "You're always haunted by the idea you're wasting your life." She highlighted that she felt utterly directionless and lost when she had to drop multiple classes. Elisa feared that she wouldn't be able to graduate. However, she did graduate in 2013 and was a student of the University of British Columbia. Soon enough, she started another blog on Tumblr with the name Nouvelle Nouveau, where she posted quotes, self-written words, and more fashion pictures. Elisa wanted to explore the world after her graduation, and the first destination on her list was California. She set out on a solo trip and traveled using the Amtrak and Intercity buses. Her social media was full of pictures she took in the San Diego Zoo, which was her first stop. It was January 26, 2013, when she arrived in Los Angeles. She was meant to stop in the city for 5 days. On January 28, 2013, she checked into the Cecil Hotel near downtown Skid Row. She'd shared a room on the 5th floor, but on January 30th, she was assigned a separate room. January 31st, 2013 started like any other day, with guests going about their routines in the Cecil Hotel. Elisa was supposed to check out that day and head to Santa Cruz. So, on her final day in LA, she went to the last bookstore just outside the hotel to get some gifts for her family. The bookstore manager, Katie Orphan, recalled Elisa as friendly, outgoing, and lively. She was buying books and discussed them with Katie.
She was very outgoing, I think, in a way that felt overwhelming and even possibly aggressive to some people, because she was going up to folks and talking to them, asking questions about everything from, their recommendations for books and music.
Elisa seemed concerned about her traveling bag being too heavy from all the books she was buying. That was the last day anyone would see her. She'd been in touch with her parents all the while she was traveling. So when she didn't contact them on January 31st, her family was immediately worried. After all, she was traveling alone, and it was totally unlike her to go by without contacting them. Her parents didn't want to take any chances and wasted no time. The next day, on February 1st, 2013, Elisa Lam was reported missing. The law enforcement agencies were no stranger to such crimes happening downtown. But this case was different. Elisa was a Canadian student on a trip to Los Angeles. Therefore, the detectives had to conduct an extensive search for answers. When the police began their search in the hotel, they left no corner untouched within the limits of the law. They went through Elisa's room looking for any clues that could lead them to her. They even brought in sniffer dogs to assist in the search, who scoured every part of the building, from the lower floors to the rooftop, hoping to pick up her scent. Unfortunately, despite their best efforts, the dogs couldn't find any trace of her away from the window that was connected to the fire escape. It meant that Elisa had climbed into the window. But the freaky part was that there were no traces beyond that. How could she have disappeared like that? Sergeant Rudy Lopez, reflecting on the search, explained that they couldn't search every room unless they had a valid reason to suspect a crime had occurred. Soon enough, new evidence came to light. Surveillance footage of the elevator. It was eerie. There was no other word to describe the CCTV clip better. Elisa was last seen in the hotel's elevator around 1:30 p.m. The footage captured her exhibiting erratic behavior, pressing multiple buttons and peering anxiously out of the elevator door. She appeared to be in distress, gesturing and talking to someone unseen. This particular episode marked the beginning of a sequence of events that would grip the public's attention as the footage circulated online. As the hours ticked by with no knowledge about Elisa, the investigators turned their attention to interviewing hotel staff, guests, and anyone who might have interacted with Elisa during her stay at the Cecil Hotel. The detectives found out that she was assigned a shared room on the hotel's 5th floor. Moreover, her roommates complained about her odd behavior, leading to Elisa being moved to a room of her own after 2 days. According to Amy Price, the manager of the Cecil Hotel at the time, Elisa would leave notes for her roommates with messages like "go home" and "go away," and she'd lock her room and require a password for entry. A few days prior to her disappearance, Elisa attended a live taping of the late-night talk show Conan in Burbank, but was escorted out by security due to disruptive behavior. Alongside physical evidence and witness statements, forensic experts were brought in to carefully examine Elisa's personal belongings discovered in her hotel room. Realizing the need for more assistance, on February 6, 2013, Los Angeles Police Department took the case public by distributing flyers with Elisa's image in the neighborhood and also online. They sought media coverage to raise awareness about her disappearance. The case garnered significant attention and sparked widespread public interest when LAPD released the surveillance clips on February 13, 2013. The CCTV footage went viral and attracted various theories and speculations about her disappearance and the circumstances surrounding the case. One theory that gained significant attention was the speculation that Elisa was attempting to play a paranormal game known as the elevator game. This game involved pressing the buttons for a series of specific floors in an elevator, supposedly leading to a different dimension or altered reality. Some suggested that Elisa's strange behavior in the elevator video was a result of her involvement in this game, which could have led to her disappearance. Given the inexplicable nature of her behavior in the video, naturally some people ventured into the realm of the paranormal. Suggestions included the presence of ghosts, spirits, or supernatural entities influencing her actions and leading to her disappearance. However, it also led to speculation that Elisa was being pursued or stalked by an unknown individual. The theory suggested that someone was following her and that her unusual behavior was a manifestation of her fear and attempts to evade the person stalking her. It fueled concerns about potential foul play involving the hotel staff and raised questions about who might have been involved. But that was not all. There were many speculations centered around the possibility of intentional self-harm. Supporters of this theory pointed to Elisa's documented history of mental health struggles, suggesting that she may have chosen to take her own life and purposefully concealed her body to make it difficult to find. But it was revealed that she had no previous records of self-harming thoughts or attempts. However, there were whispers of an incident where she had briefly disappeared before. What made it even more unsettling was her struggle with bipolar disorder and her tendency to neglect the prescribed medications. This lapse would occasionally unleash vivid hallucinations that drove her to seek shelter under her bed. In fact, these episodes were so intense that she had to be hospitalized at least once to cope with their effects. So, many believe that Elisa was experiencing a severe mental breakdown or psychiatric episode. The erratic movements, seemingly talking to someone unseen, and unusual gestures seen in the elevator video led to speculations about her mental state. But it could definitely not explain her disappearance. The most horrific guess was the presence of a hidden assailant near the elevator. Some viewers believe that someone off-camera was manipulating or controlling Elisa's actions, and the same person or group of people was responsible for her disappearance. The case also gave rise to conspiracy theories. Some suggested that her disappearance and the subsequent media coverage were part of a government cover-up or involved hidden agendas. These theories ranged from claims of experimentation to secretive organizations orchestrating the events. The video garnered 3 million views and 40,000 comments in the first 10 days. Opinions were flooding in, but Elisa was still missing and the hotel was functioning as usual. People were scared and confused, but there was no disruption to the daily routine. Days were passing by without any major events going on. The only remotely useful thing that happened at the hotel in the following days was that the water in the taps had low pressure. The water appeared black in color and tasted a bit off.
Water is not clean. It came out darker when I first turned on the tap. The shower is very. The shower it's not coming out properly. The pressure was blocked pretty badly, and the taps were the same. But there was a strange taste to the water. I mean, this is the first time we came to America, so we just assumed the water pressure is lower, and we just thought that's the way the water tastes here, maybe due to pollution or something.
There was a 1,000-gallon water tank on the rooftop of the Cecil Hotel that provided water to all the rooms, kitchen, and the coffee shop. Of course, the hotels were supposed to provide a clean and sanitary environment, so it was their responsibility to take care of this issue. So finally, after registering multiple complaints, on February 19, 2013, hotel maintenance worker Santiago Lopez went to check the water tank. The hatch of the tank was already open, and the worker peered into it. What he saw would haunt him forever. He had found Elisa's missing body, naked and floating face up in the water tank. Her garments were just next to her on the surface of the water.
A disturbing development in the search for a young Vancouver woman in Los Angeles. Nearly 3 weeks after Elisa Lam went missing, a body has been found in a water tank on the roof of her hotel.
The police once again arrived at the hotel, and this time, it was a crime scene. They had to remove her naked body from the tank, but it was not possible through the narrow hatch, so they had to cut up the tank to ensure that her body was retrieved without damaging any possible evidence.
Firefighters used their specialized tools to be able to cut the sides of the tank, remove the metal so they could as carefully remove the body for the coroner's office to conduct their investigation.
It was not just Elisa's death that was terrifying. There seemed to be something else at play. For starters, the roof was always locked and no one other than the staff members could access it. If anyone ever tried forcing it open, an alarm was designed to go off. But the police considered the possibility that someone had been reckless and left it unlocked. By now, everyone had heard about the mental episodes she suffered from. So could it mean that Elisa wanted to seek refuge somewhere and ended up hiding in the tank and couldn't get out? Again, the question was that if she entered willingly, why didn't she get out when she felt uncomfortable there? There were many questions floating around, so the police sent her body for an autopsy. On February 21, 2013, the Los Angeles Coroner's Office delivered its verdict. Elisa Lam's untimely demise was attributed to accidental drowning. Ruling out other theories, they suspected she died because of her bipolar disorder. Due to the state of decomposition, her body appeared bloated and greenish, with signs of marbling and skin separation. Remarkably, there were no signs of physical injuries, assault, or evidence to suggest taking her own life. Toxicology tests revealed traces of prescription medication that matched those found among her personal belongings, as well as over-the-counter drugs like Sinutab and ibuprofen. A minute amount of alcohol was detected, but no other recreational substances were present. It was also suspected that either she'd stopped taking her medicine for bipolar disorder or was underdosing. After the forensic report was made public, Elisa's father, David, expressed his disappointment as it had failed to answer major questions. He said, how could Lam have access to the rooftop and climb up the water tank? What's the exact cause of her death? These questions remain unclear. While the investigation into Elisa Lam's death provided insights into the cause of her demise, it still left unanswered questions about how she ended up in the water tank. The mystery extended beyond her presence on the hotel's roof, prompting speculation about the possibility of her accessing the tank on her own. The 4 cylindrical tanks, each measuring 4 feet by 8 feet, were elevated on concrete blocks, lacking a fixed entrance. Hotel staff needed a ladder to inspect the water inside. These tanks were equipped with heavy lids that would be challenging to close from within. During the initial phases of the investigation, when Elisa's body was still missing, despite extensive searches by police dogs through the hotel premises, including the roof, no trace of Elisa was found. However, the garments discovered in the tank contained sand granules, suggesting the possibility that she might have been dragged or she willingly chose to crawl, remaining close to the ground. In either of these cases, one would expect the scent to be easily detectable by the dogs. Adding to the already mysterious case, it was discovered that the roof doors of the hotel were supposed to be locked, raising concerns of how Elisa gained access to the rooftop. A video circulating on the internet after her death revealed that the hotel's roof was easily reachable via the fire escape, and in the video, 2 of the water tank lids were open. Following Elisa Lam's tragic death, an intriguing aspect emerged concerning her Tumblr blog. Despite her passing, the blog continued to receive updates, leading to questions about how these posts were being published. Was her attack hacked? Or was someone intentionally teasing the authorities for getting away with a murder? Another possibility was that the posts were scheduled using Tumblr's queue feature, allowing them to be automatically published even when the user was no longer actively engaged. However, the whereabouts of Elisa's phone remained a mystery, as it was neither discovered with her body nor in her hotel room. More doubts emerged regarding the autopsy report and its conclusions due to missing information. The report failed to disclose the results of the assault kit and fingernail kit, leaving uncertainty about whether they were even processed. It seemed like a massive cover-up. Some believed that hotel staff were concealing a dark secret, while others accused the hotel managers of protecting their reputation. The police, too, faced scrutiny with suspicions of incompetence in handling the case. The circumstances surrounding Elisa Lam's death sparked comparisons to plot elements in the horror film Dark Water. It was unclear if her demise was a mere coincidence or a well-thought-out, elaborate, and sick attempt to recreate the movie. In September 2013, Elisa's parents took legal action by filing a wrongful death suit against the hotel. They claimed that the hotel failed to adequately inspect and address potential hazards that posed an unreasonable risk to their daughter and other guests. The lawsuit sought unspecified damages and burial costs. The hotel countered by arguing that it could not have reasonably anticipated that Elisa would enter the water tanks, and since the manner in which she gained access to the tanks remained unknown, no liability could be attributed to them for failing to prevent it. Ultimately, in 2015, the lawsuit was dismissed. While the cause of Elisa's death was determined, the case left many unanswered questions and lingering doubts. The circumstances surrounding her actions and how she ended up in the water tank remain subjects of speculation and interpretation. The lack of a clear motive or conclusive evidence led to various theories and interpretations of what transpired in the moments leading up to her tragic demise, but they were not enough, and the case was eventually considered closed, as no foul play was suspected, or at least none that could be proven. For those who cherished Elisa Lam, finding closure was, and still is, a multifaceted and ongoing endeavor. While the investigation shed light on the circumstances surrounding her passing, the emotional toll that accompanied it could not be resolved. Ultimately, closure in the Elisa case was an individual experience, subjective to each person touched by her absence. While the investigation reached its end, the emotional journey of those affected by her loss still persists. What do you think happened to Elisa Lam? Where could her phone be? Let us know your thoughts. We'd love to hear from you. On November 24, 1989, Central Washington University student 18-year-old Mandy Stavik suddenly went missing after taking a jog through her neighborhood. Her body was discovered by a search team 3 days later in a nearby river. So what exactly happened to Mandy? Did she drown while taking a swim? Or did something much more sinister happen to her? Acme, a town in Whatcom County, Washington, United States. It's located in the South Fork Valley between the northern Cascade Mountains and Lake Whatcom. The town is locally known as a scenic area and contains several camping opportunities along Lake Whatcom. Many people who live in the place choose it because of its good reputation, as well as its closeness to several parks and recreational areas. Mandy was born on the 16th of April 1971 to Glen and Mary Stavik. She was not an only child, but had 3 siblings by the names of Brent, Lee, and Molly. In 1974, Glen and Mary's marriage came crashing down and they went their separate ways. Brent, who was Mandy's older brother, died the following year at the age of 17 during a hunting trip in Alaska. Following this, Mary relocated from Palmer, Alaska to Acme with her 3 children, and they began a new life there. Mandy was in the 7th grade around this time. She soon got used to her new environment and also became a popular face around the neighborhood. She was full of life, and it was just impossible not to love her. At school, in her new environment, Mandy excelled, not only in academics, but also in other extracurricular activities. She was a member of the school band, and she could play the flute, clarinet, and saxophone. She also had a love for athletics, and this made her join the basketball team. Her passion for sports did not stop there, as she could also play softball and ride on horseback. She wanted to do everything. She wanted to be very good at everything she did. And she was. Mary, Mandy's mother, had said. She was a high achiever, a former teacher of Mandy told the media. She wanted to do well in everything she did. She had it all going for her. She had a bright future ahead of her. The house where Mandy lived together with her mother and siblings was located on Strand Road and was about a mile from the highway. And about 5 miles from the house was a river popularly referred to as Nooksack River by the locals. Mandy was in the habit of jogging around her neighborhood. She'd often start from her house and run westbound toward the west side of the Strand Road and down to the Nooksack River. It was her favorite route, and her mother Mary and the family German shepherd named Kyra joined her occasionally on her run. However, Mary usually rode a bike instead of jogging alongside her daughter. By the time Mandy graduated from Mount Baker High School, she was conversant in sign language. To top it off, she graduated as an honors student, and her mother's joy knew no bounds. Mandy had big dreams and hoped one day to become a commercial pilot. With this burning desire, she went to Central Washington University at the age of 18 and believed that in a few years she would have obtained her commercial pilot's license. However, after only a few months of experiencing university life, she realized that being a commercial airline pilot was not, after all, something she was passionate about. She just couldn't see herself sitting for long hours in front of the flight instrument panel of an aircraft. And due to this, she decided to choose a different career path. At her new school, she met Yoko, a Japanese girl who was also pursuing a degree at the university. The two were roommates, and they quickly went on to become great friends. From Yoko, Mandy learned the rudiments of the Japanese language, and in no time, she was speaking it fairly fluently. Mandy was also in a relationship with a guy whose name was Rick Zender. It was an affair that her family and friends were well aware of. The two had been dating right from when she was in high school. In November 1989, Central Washington University observed Thanksgiving, and students were allowed to go home to spend time with their families and loved ones. Mandy said goodbye to her friends at school and traveled down to Acme to be with her family. Yoko also went along with her. When the two arrived there, everyone was happy to see them. It was a full house, as some relatives were also around for the holiday. Mandy quickly went around to introduce her Japanese friend, and in no time, Yoko was feeling like she'd been part of the family for a long time. The atmosphere around the house was generally a lively one, and no one had any idea that a terrible disaster was close by. The present was what they were all focused on, and they went about eating and drinking with no worry for the future. The following day, which was November 24th, Mandy and Yoko got out of the house and took a walk around the neighborhood. She used the opportunity to show her excited friends some points of interest. When they got back to the house, they settled down to a tasty meal. Around 2 p.m., Mandy announced that she was going out for a jog. Mary could not join her because she was busy attending to the relatives that were around. Yoko also decided to stay indoors and busy herself with something else. Mandy changed into a light-colored sweatshirt and teal-green sweatpants. On her feet, she wore light blue running shoes that had purple stripes. She also grabbed her Walkman so she could listen to music while out jogging. At around 2:30 p.m., she left the house and Kyra the German Shepherd followed at her heels. That was the last time she would be seen alive by her mother. 2 hours went by and neither Mandy nor the dog returned. Mary began to slightly worry. She knew her daughter was someone who kept a routine, and so she should have been back from her jog. It was very unusual. I was panicked. She was so consistent in what she always did. There was no reason for her not to come back, Mary said. While Mary was still trying to figure out what might be wrong, Kyra bounded into the house with her tail tucked between her legs. Mary looked around for Mandy, but realized that the dog had returned alone. She immediately dialed Rick's number as she felt Mandy might have stopped by her boyfriend's place before finally coming home. However, when Rick picked up, it wasn't the words she was expecting that she heard. He told her that he hadn't seen Mandy, and she knew immediately that something was terribly wrong. After getting off the phone with Rick, she called the sheriff and told him about what had happened. She also called as many people as she could think of to inform them about Mandy's disappearance. In no time, a majority of the community, as well as police officers, were out searching for her. People also came forward to give accounts of how they'd seen her jogging around in the afternoon of that day. Lee, my son, he was at the Andersons' house, which is about halfway between my house and Highway 9 down Strand Road, Mary said. He was there visiting his friend, Jeremy. He remembered seeing her jog by, coming home, she added. The search for Mandy for that day proved to be futile, and neither did Mandy return home. The following day, the search intensified, and Detective Ron Peterson led a team of officers to look through the woods and various places around the neighborhood, especially along the trail where she was known to jog. But there was no sign of her anywhere. 2 days after Mandy vanished without a trace, a team that was assigned to search for her came across something odd. They were checking the side of the road when one of them saw a pair of green sweatpants. Mary was called to the scene to identify if the clothing items were Mandy's. I didn't remember exactly what she was wearing, but I didn't think they could have been. For one thing, they were dirty, and they had ripped holes in them, and Mandy wouldn't have ever worn anything like that, Mary said. Due to Mary's uncertainty, the pants were collected and sent to the laboratory for analysis to determine if they were Mandy's, but the results returned nothing that could be of help. November 27, 1989, made it 3 days since Mandy went missing. Her family were devastated about not knowing what had become of her, but they remained hopeful that she would be found alive. The hope was that they'd find her alive, Mandy's older sister, Molly, said. We just prayed that they would find her alive. You think to yourself, God, maybe she's just hurt. She can't get home, she added. Officers decided to also look at the surrounding water bodies, and with the help of a boat owned by a neighboring district fire department, they began their search of the Nooksack River. Detective Ron led the team. We came around the corner and we got out of the main river and then into a little side channel, and I could see pink. Something pink, Detective Ron said. The object they saw was stuck in some river debris, and when they got close enough, they realized that it was the body of the woman they'd been looking for. She was not wearing anything except for the striped running shoes she'd worn out to jog several days earlier. The search team stopped the boat and Detective Ron got inside the knee-deep water to retrieve Mandy's body. Afterwards, it was placed in a body bag and taken away for autopsy. Mandy's family were informed about the discovery and the state in which her body had been found. They were simply shattered by the news. It was all too much to take in. I remember running out of the house. I ran off into the field and I just remember screaming at life, at God. How could something like this happen? How could he let something like that happen? Molly said. When news of Mandy's death spread, the community was thrown into commotion. The fact that a murder had been committed in a place that was usually very peaceful and incident-free was unsettling, and residents began to eye each other suspiciously. Detectives immediately began an investigation to understand what had really happened to Mandy. The state of undress in which she'd been found made detectives strongly suspect foul play. However, there was no way to tell this for sure since the area she'd been found in was undisturbed and there was no obvious sign of struggle. There were scratches on Mandy's arms and legs, and detectives believed that she must have gotten them while running through thorns. She also had an obvious injury at the back of her head. The autopsy that was conducted the following day after the body was recovered revealed that she had died by drowning. Detectives were puzzled by this because the part of the river where her body was found was shallow, and so it seemed very impossible that it had been an accidental drowning. There was also evidence to suggest that she'd been sexually abused, and detectives knew at that moment that they had a case of homicide on their hands. They speculated that whomever killed Mandy had abducted her using a weapon. They believed whomever it was had then sexually assaulted her, and after this, she'd tried to flee. The assailant had caught up with her and hit the back of her head with an object. He then proceeded to drown her in the river. The first person the authorities suspected of having something to do with the whole situation was Rick. He was immediately questioned. However, detectives saw nothing that could have tied him to Mandy's death, and he was cleared. To further shed more light on the situation, Detective Ron, who had undergone training at the time on the recovery of DNA, was able to collect DNA evidence from Mandy's body and sent it to the FBI for testing. The profile of an unknown male was soon established, and when it was checked against the database, no match was found. From there, the investigation intensified. Detectives followed up on tips that were received from well-meaning individuals, but none of this yielded any result. Several people were interviewed, and the DNA of about 30 men in Acme were analyzed, but nothing came out of it. On December 4, 1989, a memorial service was held for Mandy at her former high school. It was a sad day, and about 1,000 students attended the 2-hour-long service to pay their respect to her. During the service, Mary, with pain evident in her voice, had said the following: "Mandy was a real survivor, and one of our philosophies, Mandy's and mine, was to take a bad situation, any bad situation, and try to make it a learning lesson and try to grow from it and profit from it. This tragedy is a real challenge to me to try to live up to that. It hasn't been easy, but on the other hand, I have made some friends." Since there was not much to go on, the case went cold. Years went by, and Mandy's killer remained a mystery. In 2009, the case was assigned to Detective Kevin Bohe. He immediately got to work and began taking a close look at the evidence that was available. "I started going through who's been interviewed, who's been talked to," Detective Kevin said. He got to find out about a drug dealer by the name of John Wisniewski who had been questioned in the past about the murder. John at the time had claimed that he knew who killed Mandy, but upon questioning, police were unable to get any meaningful information out of him. John's DNA also did not match the DNA that was recovered from Mandy's body, so he was ruled out as a potential suspect. Detective Kevin decided to once again interrogate and see what he could get out of him. He traveled to Cambodia where John had moved to, but in the end, nothing came out of it. The case would remain stagnant until the unexpected happened 3 years later. One day in June 2013, 2 unrelated women by the name of Mary Lee Anderson and Heather Backstrom, who lived near Bellingham, a city about 35 minutes' drive from Acme, decided to take their kids to the local park. While their little children played a short distance away, the 2 women sat with a group of other mothers and they began chatting about their respective families and life in general. Soon the conversation centered on the unsolved murder of Mandy that had taken place several years earlier. All of a sudden, Heather said that she knew who the killer was. With surprise written all over her face, Mary Lee also said she knew who it was. At that point, the 2 women barely knew each other, although they had both attended Mount Baker High School as teenagers. As it turned out, the 2 women had suspicions about the same man, and that man's name was Timothy Bass. Intrigued by the fact that they were both talking about the same individual, the 2 exchanged stories of their past encounter with Timothy. According to the story Mary Lee shared, Timothy was a friend of her husband, and one night while she was home alone with her child, he'd stopped in from a hunting trip to use the house phone. After attempting to dial a number which did not go through, he then walked over to the bedroom where she was. There, he told her that he wanted to make love to her. Mary Lee was shocked by the audacity and threatened to call the police on him. He persisted with his talks, but in the end, she managed to get him out of the house. Heather's experience with Timothy, on the other hand, happened when she was 15. It was after a softball game in the summer of 1989, a few months before Mandy's murder, Heather said. We decided, a bunch of us, to go to Dairy Queen, she added. She'd been sitting in the front seat of a truck driven by a guy named Dan. Sitting beside her was also Timothy, and during the course of the journey, he began to aggressively flirt with her. He would talk about my eyes and say that my eyes were beautiful. Then he took, a pen out of a cup holder and would, start rubbing it along my knees because I was wearing cut-off sweatpants. Timothy did not go too far with his act, probably due to the presence of Dan. But ever since that day, the memory stuck with Heather, and she tried as much as possible to avoid him in the neighborhood. After sharing their disturbing experiences, they grew even more certain that he knew something about Mandy's murder. Mary Lee reached out to Detective Ken Gates, who had been her high school classmate and was working at the Whatcom Sheriff's Office. She told of his suspicion about Timothy and also gave the reasons why she had them. I really wasn't ready because we're in a small town, and to accuse someone of something we don't know for sure is a little scary, Mary Lee said. Detective Gates and the other detectives assigned to Mandy's case began unraveling as much as they could about Timothy. What they found out was that he had no criminal record, but something else about him caught their attention. Back in 1989, at the time of the murder, Timothy and his family had been living in a house that was right along Mandy's favorite running route. Where he lived was not too far from Mandy's house. His family was well liked in the community, and he had also attended the same high school as Mandy. In January 1990, he'd gotten married to a woman by the name of Gina Malone and moved to Everson. This is a city in Washington that's about 19 miles north of Acme. The union between Timothy and Gina produced 3 children, and he was leading a pretty normal and quiet life, working as a delivery driver for a bakery known as the France Bakery Outlet. Detectives also discovered that none of the male members of Timothy's family, including him, had been asked to provide their DNA for testing. Due to this, detectives decided to pay him a visit at his home. When they got there, they talked to him about Mandy, but his response suggested that he could barely remember who she was. That was definitely a red flag for me, which indicated to me that he was obviously lying, Detective Kevin said. Everybody knew what the Mandy Stavik case was, and she ran past his house every day. How could you not know it? Timothy was then asked for saliva samples so that they could obtain his DNA, but he refused. The reason he gave was that he did not trust them. He told them that he had watched crime shows and seen how people went to prison after giving their DNA. This only made detectives grow more suspicious of him, but since they could not force him to give his DNA, they took their leave. But since that day, they began to watch him more closely. Detectives also went to his workplace and met with a woman by the name of Kim Wagner. She was the manager of the bakery. They told her that they were investigating Timothy and needed help in obtaining his DNA, but they didn't reveal to her what exactly they were investigating him for. They came in, they said that there's an employee here under investigation for a case and they'd like to get a route information and maybe collect a cigarette butt in there. At that point, I just shut them down. I was like, yeah, no, this is way above my pay grade. She immediately directed them to the Human Resources Department, and there detectives met with a brick wall. The owner of the bakery refused to be of help after finding out what the detectives were there for. They wanted a subpoena or a search warrant, and we didn't have sufficient probable cause to get a warrant, Whatcom County Sheriff Bill Elfo said. It was a disappointing period for detectives, and they had to accept a temporary defeat. Around 2017, the bakery manager, Kim, her husband and some friends were having a random discussion in the comfort of their home. The topic soon shifted to the 1989 murder and how Timothy used to live on the same street as Mandy. At that moment, it occurred to Kim that detectives had been to her workplace years back because they were investigating Timothy in connection to the murder. A short while after this, detectives went back once again to the bakery with the hopes of getting Timothy's delivery route. When they got there, they met with Kim, and this time around, she offered to help them get Timothy's DNA sample. They had to decline her offer because they did not want to use a civilian in their investigative work. However, they agreed to accept any evidence she brought to them. I 100% volunteered to do it, Kim said. The reason I wanted to know was I'm a mom now. If something happened to my daughter, I'd want someone to help me. And the thought of her mom never having an answer of who did that to her daughter, if I could help her find that peace, I wanted to do it. For several weeks, Kim had no luck with getting her hands on any item that contained Timothy's DNA. For some strange reason, he always took his trash home with him and was also in the habit of wearing gloves while working. Then one day, he probably got carried away and threw away a plastic cup. Luckily, Kim saw him doing this and she acted fast. I looked in the garbage and my heart was like beating out of my chest, Kim said. I grabbed it and I put it in my desk drawer. I was like, oh my God, that just happened. She eventually passed on the cup to detectives who immediately sent it for testing. All that was left was to wait. So about 3 months later, we got the results from the state crime lab, and Katie from the crime lab says, Kevin, we've got a match, Detective Kevin said. After hearing those words, Detective Kevin was overjoyed. He knew that after so many years, the case was finally solved. On December 12, 2017, detectives went to Timothy's workplace and arrested him there. He was charged with rape and first-degree murder of Mandy. When he was interrogated, he denied having anything to do with the murder, but told detectives that both he and Mandy had been having a secret relationship, and the reason why his DNA was found inside her was that he had slept with her hours before she disappeared. When Mandy's family heard Timothy's claim about a secret relationship, they immediately made it clear that he was lying. There's no way my sister would have a relationship, a physical relationship, with Tim Bass, Molly said. She was way, way, way out of his league, to put it bluntly. Since Timothy maintained his innocence, the case went to trial. But months before the trial began, his attorneys made attempts to have the DNA evidence rendered invalid. Their reason was that the way detectives had collected the evidence violated Timothy's Fourth Amendment right. However, much to their disappointment, a judge decided that the evidence would be presented at trial. During this period, Timothy's wife, Gina, filed for divorce. The trial began in May 2019, and during the 2 weeks it lasted, Timothy's attorney tried to convince the court that he was guiltless. However, many witnesses, including Timothy's younger brother Tom Bass, came forward to give testimony against him that further sealed his fate. When Tom was called to the witness stand, he revealed that while Timothy was under investigation, he had told him that he had slept with Mandy several years back. He then asked Tom to lie to the police also that he had slept with her. Tom also recounted another incident where Timothy had asked his mother to also lie that they were Christmas shopping at the time of Mandy's disappearance. Despite all of these revelations, Timothy's attorney still tried to give an excuse for his actions, but the jury was not moved. They had made up their minds. On May 24, 2019, Timothy was found guilty of Mandy's murder, and at the age of 50, he was sentenced to 27 years in prison. For Mandy's family, the sentencing brought a sense of comfort. Mary, who never thought the case would one day be solved, had the following to say. Definitely closure, I feel. After all, they've got the guy that did it. He'll spend enough years in jail, so if he ever does get out, his life will be practically over. Sadly, the life of a young, beautiful, and ambitious woman like Mandy was brought to an abrupt end. However, there's still the relief in knowing that her killer has been brought to justice. But do you think there was a chance that both Mandy and Timothy had a secret affair? Or was it something he said out of desperation? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section. In the winter of 1935, Roland T. Owen checked into the Hotel President in Kansas City, Missouri. Little did he know that a violent and mysterious end would cut his stay short. Bound, beaten, and left to suffer alone, Owen's murder remains an enigma to this day. Who was responsible? And what drove them to commit such a heinous act? Kansas City, Missouri is a vibrant city that leaves an indelible mark on its residents and visitors alike. The city's magic lies in its rich cultural heritage and culinary delights. It's been a cradle for jazz music, giving birth to the iconic Kansas City jazz scene. With its unique charm, each neighborhood creates a tapestry of vibrant communities. From the lively River Market District to the upscale allure of the Country Club Plaza in the south, there's something to suit every taste and preference. But what truly sets Kansas City apart is its people. Warm and welcoming, the residents of Kansas City exude a friendly and hospitable nature. It's in that nature that they welcomed Ronald Owen in 1935. Early in the afternoon of January 2, 1935, Ronald T. Owen walked into the elegant Hotel President in Kansas City. He approached the front desk, dressed sharply in a dark overcoat, and requested an interior room on a higher floor. Introducing himself as Ronald T. Owen from Los Angeles, he was described as being in his late 20s or early 30s, having brown hair and a cauliflower ear. He paid for one night, and these remarkable features left a lasting impression on the staff. Randolph Probst, a bellhop, accompanied Ronald to the 10th floor in the elevator. During the ride, Ronald casually shared that he'd spent the previous night at the nearby Mühlebach Hotel, but found the rate too expensive. Probst opened room 1046, an interior room overlooking the hotel's courtyard, per the guest's request. Ronald unpacked minimally, only taking out a hairbrush, comb, and toothpaste from his coat pocket. After leaving the room, Ronald asked Probst to leave it unlocked, claiming he was expecting a friend to join him shortly. Probst obliged and returned to his duties. Shortly after, he saw Ronald leave the hotel. In a short while, Mary Soptic, one of the hotel maids, arrived for her shift and entered room 1046 to clean. She was surprised to find Ronald there as another guest had occupied the room the previous night. Apologizing for the intrusion, she offered to clean the room, and Ronald asked her to proceed. As Soptic cleaned, she noticed Ronald's preference for dim lighting. He kept the shades drawn and only relied on one dim lamp in the room. This, along with his somewhat anxious demeanor, struck Soptic as unusual. After a few minutes, Ronald brushed his hair, put on his coat, and left the room. He requested Soptic to leave the door unlocked, claiming his friend would be arriving shortly. At 4 p.m., Soptic returned to room 1046 with fresh towels. As she approached the room, she noticed it was unusually dark. When she entered, she found Roland lying on the bed, fully dressed. Throughout his stay, Ronald displayed an affinity for secrecy and privacy. On multiple occasions, hotel staff observed him with the shades drawn and minimal lighting. He even left a note on the bedside table instructing someone named Dawn to wait for him, suggesting a clandestine meeting. His behavior seemed anxious or fearful, further fueling speculation about his intentions. On the morning of January 3, 1935, bright and early, Soptic made her way back to room 1046. She approached the door, ready to tackle the day, but to her surprise, it was locked. Now, that suggests that Ronald wasn't there because doors tend to be locked from the outside. But when Soptic unlocked the door, guess who was sitting there in the dark? Yep, you guessed it. Ronald himself, sitting in the exact same spot as the previous afternoon. Just as Soptic's confusion was about to peak, the phone rang. Gripping the phone with a mix of surprise and nonchalance, Ronald answered it. "No, Dawn, I don't want to eat. Seriously, I just had breakfast. No appetite here," he muttered into the receiver. While placing the phone back, Ronald quizzed Soptic about her job. He asked her several questions, from whether she was in charge of the whole floor to if the hotel president was residential. He also complained about the outrageous rates at the Mühlebachs. As soon as Soptic finished tidying up, she made a swift exit. It was time for her to tackle the world beyond room 1046. Around 4 p.m., Soptic returned, armed with fresh towels. When she approached the room, her ears caught snippets of a conversation between two men. Curiosity piqued, she knocked on the door, and a booming voice that definitely wasn't Ronald's replied, demanding to know who was disturbing their little chat. Soptic confidently announced her towel delivery, only to be met with an unexpected response. "No need for towels here," the voice boomed back. Soptic was surprised because she was the one that took away the towels that very morning. In the evening, a weary Jean Owen, no relation, checked into room 1048. Jean Owen, a woman from out of town, visited the city to shop, but after a draining shopping spree in the city, she felt a little under the weather and decided to treat herself to a stay at the Hotel President. Room 1048 became her cozy haven for the night. Her boyfriend, who was a florist by day and Romeo by night, couldn't resist paying her a visit around 9 in the evening. Love was in the air, or maybe just the scent of fresh roses. The two lovebirds enjoyed a delightful 2-hour rendezvous. But Jean's peaceful night soon took a nosedive. The night unfolded with loud conversations drifting through the halls, with men and women cursing and shouting. However, it wasn't just Gene Owen who observed the peculiar late-night activities on the hotel president's 10th floor. Charles Blocker, the elevator operator, embarked on his midnight shift, bracing himself for whatever adventures the night had in store. The hotel was abuzz, with guests needing his expert transportation services. The clock ticked past 1:30 a.m., and the hotel seemed to succumb to slumber, except for the jamboree taking place in room 1055. The decibel levels could rival a rock concert, causing poor Charles to wonder if he'd inadvertently stumbled upon a wild party rather than a dignified hotel. One incident caught his attention. An intriguing woman, a regular on the scene, let's call her Miss X, and she was known for her unconventional nocturnal stops and visits to lone male occupants in their rooms. The elevator whisked her up, and she confidently asked Charles about the whereabouts of room 1026. A mere 5 minutes later, the elevator journeyed back to the 10th floor, only to reveal the woman wearing an expression of bewilderment. She couldn't fathom why the man who'd summoned her was nowhere to be found. She even speculated that perhaps he'd taken residence in room 1024 as she spotted the telltale sign of light emanating through the window. Determined to find her date, she lingered on the floor. Half an hour passed, and the elevator's summons beckoned Charles back to the 10th floor. Like clockwork, Miss X stood before him again, accompanying a gentleman. Down they went to the lobby, giggling as they shared a private joke. At 4:15 a.m., a call from the 9th floor echoed through the receiver, and, surprise, surprise, it was the same Miss X, endeavoring in her late-night elevator escapades. Charles dutifully escorted her to the lobby, bidding her farewell for the remainder of the morning. However, the puzzle continued as a call to the 9th floor just 15 minutes later was for the man who had accompanied her earlier. Claiming he couldn't sleep, he opted for a leisurely stroll in the wee hours, much to Charles's amusement. Later that evening, around 11 p.m., a city worker named Robert Lane encountered a partially dressed man flagging him down near 13th Street and Lydia Avenue. The man, who appeared disheveled and apologized for mistaking Lane's car for a taxi, asked for a ride to where he could find a taxi. Observing a deep scratch on the man's arm and sensing his distress, Lane offered assistance. In the mirror, Lane noticed the man cupping his arm, possibly to catch blood from a more severe wound. Lane dropped him off at an intersection known for its taxi drivers and continued on his way. The events that unfolded during that night are shrouded in mystery. It's uncertain whether these occurrences are connected to Ronald's fate. The morning of January 4th, 1935, brought alarming signs from room 1046 of the hotel president. Della Ferguson, the new switchboard operator, noticed that the phone in Ronald's room was off the hook when she attempted to make a requested wake-up call. She alerted the hotel staff, and Randolph Probst, who had previously interacted with Ronald, was sent to investigate. When he knocked on the door, he received instructions from Ronald's muffled voice, but could not enter as the door remained locked. Ronald asked him to turn on the lights, but Probst still couldn't access the room. Frustrated, Probst yelled at Ronald to hang up the phone and left, informing Ferguson that the guest might be drunk and advising her to wait. By 8:30 a.m., the phone was still off the hook, prompting Harold Pike, another bellboy, to be sent to room 1046. Although a Do Not Disturb sign was in place, Pike had a key and let himself in. The room was dimly lit, and he found Roland lying on the bed naked, appearing heavily intoxicated. Pike noticed dark spots on the bedding in the faint light, but refrained from turning on the room light. Instead, he went to the telephone stand and discovered the phone on the floor. Returning it to the stand, he hung up the receiver. Later, around 10:30 a.m., the phone in room 1046 was again off the hook. Randolph Probst, the bellhop, was dispatched once more, armed with a key. Finding the Do Not Disturb sign still hanging on the door, he knocked several times, but received no response. Concerned, he entered the room using his key. What he discovered was a scene of horror. Roland was on his knees and elbows, just 2 feet away, his head covered in blood. Probst swiftly turned on the light. To his dismay, he noticed bloodstains on the walls, bed, and bathroom. Overwhelmed by the scene, Probst hurried downstairs to seek help. The assistant manager accompanied Probst back to room 1046, where they found Roland collapsed on the floor, near to the main door, making it quite tricky to open the door fully. However, as they made their way into the room, Roland struggled to sit on the edge of the bathtub. The police were called, and Dr. Harold Flanders of Kansas City General Hospital arrived to attend to the severely injured young man. Dr. Flanders carefully examined Roland. The extent of Roland's injuries was shocking. There were signs that the young man had been found with cords around his neck, wrists, and ankles. Bruising on his neck indicated a possible attempt at strangulation, while multiple stab wounds were on his chest, one of which punctured his lung. Blows to his head had left a skull fracture on the right side. Dr. Flanders also noted blood splatter on the ceiling as he inspected the room. Concerned for Roland's well-being, Dr. Flanders urgently asked him who'd caused these injuries. Roland responded with a chilling reply, "Nobody." When pressed about the cause of his wounds, he claimed to have fallen and hit his head on the bathtub. The doctor even questioned whether Roland had attempted to take his own life, to which he vehemently denied any such intention. However, as their conversation progressed, Roland lost consciousness and was swiftly transported to the hospital. Despite the medical team's efforts, Roland's condition rapidly deteriorated, and he passed away shortly after midnight on January 5, 1935. The Kansas City Police Department, KCPD, sprung into action as soon as they were notified of the mysterious murder. They knew they had to act swiftly, as time was their greatest adversary. They began by interviewing Jean Owen, a woman who bore no relation to the dead man, even though her last name matched the deceased's. The investigators had a hunch that this might be more than just a coincidence. They detained Jean, eager to extract any information that could shed light on the perplexing case. The proximity of her residence to the crime scene and her mysterious check-in on the night of the murder raised eyebrows, making her an intriguing person of interest. Jean was taken into custody, and with bated breath, the detectives listened to her account of what she'd heard on that fateful night. Thankfully for Jean, her boyfriend, the florist, arrived at the police station and corroborated her story, leading to her release. She returned to Lee's Summit, leaving the detectives to grapple with new leads. Meanwhile, the cause of Roland's demise remained a puzzle that demanded solving. Doctors performed an autopsy, examining both the body and the bloodstains that marred the crime scene. Dr. Flanders meticulously studied the dried bloodstains, determining that the injuries had been inflicted between 4 and 5 a.m. that very day. This aligned with the observations made by Pike and Probst, providing a crucial timeline for the investigation. The crime scene yielded a mix of potential evidence and perplexing items. As the detectives combed through room 1046, they took note of what was present and what was conspicuously absent. The lack of clothing in the closets and drawers mirrored Probst's earlier observation. It was as if the room had been cleared of any evidence that didn't belong to Roland. The room appeared untouched, except for a solitary tag from a necktie, hinting at the possibility of an unknown connection. The absence of knives dispelled the theory of suicide, as the stab wounds on Roland's chest could not be self-inflicted. The cords used to bind him also pointed to the involvement of others. One of the room's 2 glasses was found in the sink with a missing piece, while its counterpart rested undisturbed on the shelf. The detectives stumbled upon other intriguing items: a mysterious hairpin, a lone safety pin, an unsmoked cigarette, and a bottle of diluted sulfuric acid. Adding another layer of mystery were the 4 fingerprints, suspected to belong to a woman because they were small, found on the phone in the room. The puzzle pieces were slowly coming together, and the detectives knew they'd stumbled upon a complex web of secrets. News of the baffling murder reached the press, and the unfolding drama captivated the public. Everyone wanted to be part of the investigation. Members of the public flocked to the funeral home where Roland's body lay, sharing their own encounters and stories. Even Lane, the brave soul who'd crossed paths with the man looking for taxi, came forward. Lane, having viewed Roland's body after his death, recognized the scratch on his arm and reported his encounter with the man to the police. But the police weren't entirely convinced, as no hotel staff had witnessed Roland leaving or returning during that fateful night. Newspapers plastered the story on their front pages, and the wires buzzed with requests for photographs. The hunt for information was on, and tips poured in like confessions during happy hour. Detectives sought the assistance of the Los Angeles Police Department to locate the next of kin, only to discover that Roland T. Owen was an alias. The fingerprints were sent to the Bureau of Investigation, hoping to find a match in their extensive collection. A woman called the hotel, seeking a description of Roland T. Owen, while revealing that he hailed from Clinton, a town near Kansas City. The case gained momentum as the public became involved, flooding the police with tips and leads. However, the investigation took a twist just when they thought they were making progress. The identity of the deceased was thrown into doubt when a man identified him as his cousin, only for the cousin's sister to confirm that he died years ago. The resemblance between the 2 men had led to the mistaken identification. Wrestling promoter from Little Rock, Arkansas, Tony Bernard, added another layer of confusion by claiming that the man had approached him as Cecil Werner, seeking wrestling opportunities. But even this lead failed to bear fruit when another promoter in Omaha denied recognizing Roland. With each passing day, the investigation encountered obstacles and roadblocks. The initial surge of leads began to dwindle as the case slipped out of the spotlight. Detectives found themselves pulled in different directions as new homicides diverted their attention. The pursuit of truth became a juggling act. There were no new leads, and the media and detectives eventually moved on to other cases. On March 3, 1935, the case once again made headlines. The funeral home responsible for the deceased man's remains announced their plan to bury him in the city's Potter's Field. However, fate had other plans in store. A mysterious call arrived at the funeral home, urging them to delay the burial. The caller requested time to send the money for a proper burial at Memorial Park Cemetery in Kansas City, Kansas, so the dead man could rest beside the caller's sister. The caller, seemingly unfazed by the idea of involving the police, made it clear that the authorities could be informed. With the case thrust back into the limelight, the detectives wasted no time in resuming their pursuit of answers. They revisited the crime scene of room 1046, hoping to uncover overlooked details that could provide fresh leads. Witnesses were re-interviewed, hoping that the passage of time might have loosened tongues and revealed new information. As the reinvestigation progressed, intriguing developments emerged. Envelopes containing money arrived at the funeral home in a local florist, accompanied by cryptic messages, signed "Love Forever, Louise." The detectives delved into the origins of these mysterious payments, tracing the phone calls to payphones. The elaborate riddles left behind by an unknown individual only deepened the mystery, fueling their determination to uncover the truth. However, the most significant breakthrough came a year later from an unexpected source, a woman from Birmingham, Alabama. A friend of Ruby Ogletree stumbled upon an article in the American Weekly that featured images of the unidentified man from room 1046. Struck by a startling resemblance to Ruby's long-lost son Artemis, she immediately contacted the Kansas City Police Department. Ruby provided crucial information, including a distinct scar on Artemis's head, acquired from a childhood accident. Finally, Roland had a name: Artemis Ogletree. Roland Owen was born to Ruby Ogletree as Artemis Ogletree in Florida in 1915. Artemis was one of 3 children in the Ogletree family. During his childhood, he experienced an unfortunate accident involving hot grease, which left a distinct scar above his ear, forever devoid of hair. In 1934, at 17, Artemis left his family, who had relocated to Birmingham, Alabama, and embarked on a journey to California by hitchhiking. His propensity for traveling light, carrying only a brush, comb, and toothpaste, suggests a transient lifestyle and a preference for minimalistic necessities. Artemis was inclined to nomadic travel, using various aliases and staying in different hotels. He could easily be described as a man in his mid-20s. He was around 5 foot 5 inches tall and weighed approximately 135 pounds. He had dark hair, a scar above his left eyebrow, and a distinctive cauliflower ear, suggesting he may have been involved in boxing or wrestling. Artemis had an air of mystery surrounding him, and he sought out wrestling matches under the name Cecil Werner. He was a man who was in touch with his family and sent home letters to his mother. When he arrived in Kansas City on January 2, 1935, Artemis assumed the alias Roland T. Owen and checked into room 1046 of the President Hotel, paying in cash and carrying no luggage. However, Ruby's account of her interactions with her son raised further questions. She'd received letters from her son even after his supposed death. The letters, typewritten and written in a style inconsistent with Artemis's previous correspondence, cast doubt on their authenticity. Another letter claimed Artemis had embarked on a voyage to Europe, followed by a special delivery letter stating that he was sailing that very day. The web of mystery continued to entangle those seeking answers. Ruby's conversations with the KCPD revealed another crucial piece of the puzzle: the St. Regis Hotel where Artemis had stayed in Kansas City. Notably, he shared a room with another man whose potential connection to Dawn could not be conclusively established. The tantalizing leads multiplied, casting a wider net in the search for answers. As the investigation unfolded, connections to a man named Joseph Martin, alias Donald Kelso, surfaced. Martin had been arrested in New York City for murder, having killed a roommate and shipped the body to Memphis in a trunk. The Kansas City Police Department discovered that samples of Martin's handwriting matched that in the letters sent to Ruby Ogletree. Although no charges were filed against Martin for the Ogletree case, the investigation remained open and unresolved. Time passed, and the case grew cold. Decades slipped away, and the investigators changed, but the allure of Artemis Ogletree's enigma endured. Then, in the early 2000s, a local historian at the Kansas City Public Library named John Horner received a mysterious call. The caller, who wished to remain anonymous, revealed they'd stumbled upon a shoebox filled with newspaper clippings and an item mentioned in the case. Unfortunately, the caller never revealed what this mysterious item was. It was a whisper from the past, a flicker of hope that the long-forgotten secrets might finally be unveiled. The anonymous caller's identity remained a mystery, but their revelation breathed fresh life into the long-dormant investigation. The case of Artemis Ogletree's mysterious death continues to captivate the minds of those entangled in its web of intrigue. The absence of concrete suspects has paved the way for many theories, each vying for a place in the narrative. One prevailing theory revolves around the telephone calls that suggested a broken engagement as the motive behind his demise, with the caller saying, "Cheaters always get what's coming to them." Then there's also the case of the flowers sent during his funeral from someone who signed Louise with the message, "Love forever." Could this tale of revenge hold the key to unraveling the enigma? Or is it merely a smokescreen obscuring a more complex truth? Another hypothesis implicates organized crime, drawing attention to the shadowy world where the name Dawn assumes a different connotation, a title donating a mafia boss. Could this clandestine underworld have orchestrated the events that led to Ogletree's untimely demise? Yet another theory suggests a deeply personal vendetta emerges, where an individual known only as Dawn harbored a personal grudge against Ogletree. Could this mysterious figure have acted alone or with the aid of the elusive commercial woman seen late that fateful night in the hotel? Which theory resonates with you the most? Will the truth ever be fully revealed, or will it remain forever shrouded in darkness? Thank you for joining us on this captivating journey in the mysterious case of Ronald T. Owen. The mysterious circumstances surrounding Ronald T. Owen's untimely demise have puzzled investigators and true crime enthusiasts alike for decades. As we conclude this investigation, we encourage you to share your thoughts, insights, and theories in the comment section below. Your contributions could be the key to unraveling the truth behind Ronald T. Owen's perplexing fate. If you enjoyed this video and want to continue exploring intriguing true crime stories, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. By doing so, you'll stay updated on our upcoming videos that delve into other baffling cases that keep us on the edge of our seats. Thank you for watching, and until next time, stay curious and stay safe. Remember, the truth is out there, waiting to be discovered.